The sea was black beneath the moon, a restless mirror broken by pale-crested swells that heaved against the basalt cliffs of Dragonstone. Wind screamed through the jagged arches of the island's natural fortifications, scattering fine sheets of brine across the courtyard where the great stone dragons kept eternal vigil. Long ago those carvings had seemed monstrous. Tonight they appeared small, almost innocent, when set against the shadow that loomed beyond the surf. No trumpet announced his coming, no beacon flared. The very sky seemed to retreat, starlight recoiling from a void that swallowed shine and shape alike. Then the water split. A column of steam roared upward as if some leviathan had breached the world's cracked crust. In that boiling plume, molten droplets of seawater caught fleeting sparks before vanishing into blackness again. A hush, too profound to belong to nature, settled over the fortress. Men at their posts forgot to breathe. Torches guttered as though cowed by a greater flame. First came a wingtip, seething with crimson veins of inner fire, each membrane thicker than the hull of a war galley. Then another, unfurling like the sails of a night-bound galleon. A ridge, a spine, a neck, long as the king's road mile, rose slow and terrible above the foaming cauldron. Balerion the Black Dread had returned, yet not as the half-mortal beast whose bones once lay entombed beneath the Red Keep. This creature dwarfed memory itself. His eyes were furnaces where lesser flames were forged and broken. His scales, great black shields veined with rings of dull red metal that shimmered whenever he breathed. Firelight leaked through them as moonlight through stained glass, revealing the slow pulse of something vast and cruelly alive. The castle trembled. Stone groaned under forces it had not felt since Valeria's doom. Above the main gate, gargoyles cracked along ancient fault lines, their faces flaking away in shards. Small folk who had taken refuge behind the walls shrank from arrow slits, whispering half-remembered prayers to the Seven, to the drowned god, even to nameless things that might pity them. Yet the shadow did not strike. Balerion lingered, colossal wings beating a rhythm older than the kingdoms he came to shatter, stirring cyclones that hurled spray high into the citadel's windows. Another shape ascended into that maelstrom, smaller only by comparison, cloaked in black and scarlet. The rider sat straight upon the ridged saddle of spine and scale as though in truth he had never perished, as though 300 years were but a single heartbeat's pause. No crown rested upon his brow, yet the winds arranged his dark hair like an obsidian helm. His face bore the high, fine plains of old Valyria, yet tempered with something starker: inevitability. Aegon Targaryen, called the Conqueror, had returned from ash and myth, and with him rode an old world's vengeance. His first words were carried not by voice but by presence. The air tasted of iron and broken promises. Wolves howled upon distant breakers they could not see. Ravens, stirred from their perches, traced panicked circles over the courtyard, then fled inland, blind to walls or talons in their terror. Aegon gazed upon the stronghold that had once been cradle and launchstone of his destiny. In his eyes nothing stirred save duty, to reclaim, to reforge, to enthrone again beneath the Black Dread's wings a vision that time itself had dared defy. He dismounted without command. Balerion lowered one titanic flank till the courtyard stones cracked beneath his weight. When Aegon's boots touched ground, the heat radiating from the dragon baked moisture from the flagstones, leaving spiderweb fissures of white salt. He passed beneath the arch of the dragon gate as though into a memory made physical. No mortal guard barred his path, for the garrison had long since fled deeper within, driven by a wordless certainty that steel could not matter here. Aegon moved at measured pace, gauntlets brushing mossed walls, fingertips remembering. Past the Hall of Dragons, iron-bound doors burst outward. Torrents of steam blew through the corridors, peeling banners from their rods. Balerion exhaled only once into the night sky. The column of flame that followed seemed to pierce heaven, turning rolling clouds incandescent crimson. Embers rained upon the bay, each spark large as a child's fist, yet none touched hull or mast of the fishing fleet anchored below. His fire obeyed a will beyond hunger now. Within the keep, candles sputtered back to life. Those brave or foolish enough to peer from shadow saw Aegon mount the spiral stair to the chamber of the painted table. The door, barred these many generations, dissolved beneath his gloved hand. Wood, iron, and bronze did not burn. They vanished, transmuted into drifting motes of rose-gold dust that swirled around him before settling like new-fallen snow. He stepped across the threshold, and for a breath the painted map of Westeros glowed in its ancient pigments, hills and rivers bright as the day the artisans first laid them. Then the colors shifted, rivers widening, coasts encroaching, the boundaries of kingdoms bending beneath unseen pressure, as if the very image recognized its master and sought to match his vision. Aegon laid a single finger upon the wooden island of Dragonstone. Power bled forth like wine from a pierced cask, reddening the seas, flowing outward across Westeros. Where that radiance traveled, men and women woke from uneasy sleep, lords in feather beds, shepherds on windswept moors, miners deep beneath the earth. Each felt a presence brush their hearts like a long-forgotten whisper. Bend the knee. Far to the north at Winterfell, the old weirwood groaned under a sudden weight of frost, though it was high summer. Maesters searching forgotten volumes for the meaning of queer red skies dropped their candles when ravens began to beat their wings within cages, calling out in one harsh voice. Across the reach, vineyards blazed under a dawnless glow and grapes split upon the vine, their juices hissing upon the soil. Even in Dorne, where scorn for Targaryen rule remained tradition and blood feud, an infant born that hour opened violet eyes. But power alone does not rebuild crowns. Memory must be carved new upon the flesh of the world. Aegon descended from the tower, footsteps echoing in halls once echoing with other boots. Rhaenyra's, demons, Rhaenys, each name a scar. In the courtyard, Balerion watched him approach with an intelligence deeper than any beast's. When Aegon placed his gauntlet upon the dragon's muzzle, the black scales glowed faintly, as coal under slow-rising dawn. The touch was a covenant sealed before witness of stars. Neither warrior nor weapon alone, but a single will made manifest. Sentries on the curtain walls found their fear tempered by awe. They peered down at the rider whose legend every child in Westeros could recite, yet whose flesh now steamed in the salt night. Aegon raised his gaze to them, and in that instant they were children again, arrayed before a father bearing final judgment. Some bowed before they understood movement. Others collapsed to their knees, swords dropping from trembling fingers. None dared meet his eyes. "Open the sea gate," the Conqueror commanded, and the words carried farther than mortal lungs could hurl them, ringing against ramparts a league away. Chains groaned, pulleys squealed, and the ancient gate began to rise, spilling moonlit water into new currents. Balerion strode forth until he stood half-submerged, tides beaten flat by the sweep of his wings. Aegon vaulted once more to the saddle and turned his face inland. The 7 kingdoms sprawled within that gaze and shuddered. He did not command flight. The dragon rose of his own choosing, as though gravity were a trinket for lesser beings. Wind screamed past talons. Salt spray crystallized upon obsidian scales. As he gained altitude, the Black Dread's shadow eclipsed the island entire, casting Dragonstone into a dusk unmarred by light. With a single beat, they crossed the channel toward Blackwater Bay. Flames yet glimmered among the distant ruins of Summerhall, relics of other fires, other follies, but Aegon spared them not a glance. His eyes were set upon the Red Keep's silhouette where it crowned King's Landing, city of bells, of dragons past, and of rulers unworthy. Yet even a conqueror returned must gather seed before harvest. He guided Balerion in a long, low arc, skirting the darkened towers until the plain opened before them, the field of fire reborn. There, legions once tasted dragonfire and learned capitulation. Now golden wheat bowed before the gusts of their passage, each stalk igniting in momentary flame before extinguishing again, unburnt. The message was clear. The fires of conquest would fall only where Aegon willed, and where they fell, nothing save obedience would remain. Far below, patrols of goldcloaks spurred horses that stumbled and threw riders, terrified by the cyclonic winds. Rumor galloped faster than hoofbeats, Within candlelit chambers, Grand Maesters clutched quills over half-written missives. Who would they warn? Who could heed? The small council had long since fractured into petty cabals. Now each lord hoped the others would be first to suffer Aegon's ire. City gates slammed shut though no army marched upon them. Streets once choked with hawkers and laughter emptied into silence broken only by the rattle of shutters. Mothers dragged children beneath tables, whispering stories of a dragon so vast its wings blotted constellations. Atop Aegon's hill, in the throne room raised by his own hand 3 centuries past, light flickered across the Iron Throne's twisted blades. Each sword sang a thread of its forging into the cavernous dark. Oaths, betrayals, victories half forgotten. Steel waited for the master smith who crafted dominion itself. Dust motes drifted through the gloom as if time hesitated. Then, as though drawn by a magnet older than war, those motes aligned into glimmering runes. One by one, the swords awakened, edges whispering against each other in memory of dragonfire so hot it turned iron to river water. The throne trembled, yearning. Balerion circled once above Blackwater Bay, wings spraying concentric ripples that hammered towers along the city walls. As he banked, midnight flames danced along the length of his tail, leaving streaks of red across the sky. Ships at anchor bucked like startled foals. Masts snapped with distant cracks. Rigging caught fire without smoke. Sailors leapt by the dozens into oily water, praying that gods or tides would shield them from the dragon's gaze. Yet none came to greater harm than terror, for Balerion's wrath held no mind of them. Yet, Aegon looked west, where summer storms brewed on the horizon above the wending Mander, where Highgarden's orchards sweetened the night with unseen blossoms. He looked northward too, beyond the twins and the frosted crowns of the neck, toward a wall uplifted by vanished sorceries. He saw each holdfast and whisperwood, each lonely tower where his blood had once thinned into myriad branches. Within his pulse he felt them all. The Targaryens who remained, scattered seeds upon indifferent soil, young princes dreaming of songs, lost queens wandering deserts of remorse, bastards wrapping themselves in borrowed names. It was not wrath that drew Aegon's lip into a slight curve, but purpose. A house divided could yet be reforged, through dread, through love, through the surety of dragonfire. As the black dread rode the wind, invulnerable scales flashing crimson and jet, campfires flared across the crownlands. Small folk knelt though no standard stirred. In Harrenhal's blasted halls, ghosts of iron raiders felt warmth for the first time in centuries. At Old Town, atop the high tower's beacon, the glass candles flared green, unbidden, blazing so bright that night looked noon-pale. And in Bravos, far across cold seas, the Titan's braziers guttered as if a vaster sentinel now watched their waves. The world remembered conquest and trembled, yet none could guess the shape of Aegon's design, for the Conqueror had not returned merely to replay an old war upon newer stones. Time had tempered him as surely as flames had tempered the Iron Throne. The kingdoms he once forged had since broken themselves in squabbles over empty chairs, in wars where dragons died and songs collapsed into dirges. He had come to seed a fire that would cleanse memory, to shatter the lie that power could rest in hands unworthy, and to birth a dominion where the dragon and the realm were one. He whispered to the wind, and the words were lost to mortal ears, but Balerion heard. The great jaws opened, revealing an inner darkness wherein stars might drown. From that abyss issued a sound neither roar nor song, but an unending chord of creation. Glass shattered across King's Landing. Highborn and beggar alike clutched their heads as fear split them wide. Yet when silence returned, no street lay twisted in flame, no tower toppled. The terror was a promise, held in abeyance. Aegon guided Balerion onward, into the northern path where pine forests drowsed under dew. He would gather his scattered kin, humble the petty crowns that dared forget, and remind the world of fire's dominion. But first he would test the forge of his might against the one realm that had never bent, the North. For the dragon that does not fear steel must still measure ice. The night sky closed behind him, and in its wake the horizon still burned with afterglow, as though dawn had forgotten which direction to rise. In the hush that followed, wind carried a new refrain across fields and rivers, whispered in every tongue of Westeros. He has come again. Bend the knee or burn. Mist wreathed the King's Road at dawn, curling through cart ruts and crowning every briar with beads that caught first light like a string of tarnished pearls. In the hush before sunrise, the road belonged to ghosts. The echo of merchant wheels, the distant clatter of a mounted escort long dismissed, the hush-hush murmur of pilgrims chanting half-forgotten prayers to stranger gods. All those sounds drained away when a shadow slid across the low hills, a darkness swift as raven wings yet vast as a moving citadel. Deer froze mid-stride. A lone fox flattened its belly to the dirt and whimpered, sensing a predator that was more phenomenon than creature. Balerion passed overhead with no more effort than a falcon taking a lazy glide, but his wake rippled banners of fog into spirals that would not settle for hours. Farms miles apart jolted to life as lanterns were snatched alight. Men staggered from bed as though the dawn itself had died. Some fell to their knees in the mud of cabbage rows, mouths working silently. Others tried to drag families beneath root cellar doors, as if a finger of dirt could shield them from power older than the wall. Above all, the iron tune of wing beats thrummed against rib and earth alike, a relentless kettledrum promising that the age of petty lords was over. Aegon allowed the dragon to drift lower, just enough that cattle scattered beneath, bawling into the chill sunrise. He was counting hearts, measuring the pulse of the realm by how swiftly terror traveled. 3 centuries ago he had learned that kingdoms did not fall through force alone. They crumbled when fear arrived first, lodging in marrow, loosening knees long before swords clashed. Yet he felt no joy in the weeping of peasants. Their terror was merely the toll demanded by history for beginning anew. By mid-morning they sighted the towers of Rosby, a modest holdfast ringed by barley fields gone golden. Smoke rose in steady ribbons from kitchen vents, blissfully unaware. Aegon tugged on braided reins that shone with dragonglass beads. Balerion banked so sharply that air cracked like thunder. Roses planted along the bailey walls wilted in a single breath of heat. Knights on morning patrol swung round just in time to watch their pennants ignite along the edges, threads curling to ash. A horn sounded, one thin, panicked note, before vanishing under a roar that ripped banners from poles. Aegon spoke, words swallowed by wind, yet the command struck like a mailed fist. Kneel. The gates of Rosby did not open so much as collapse outward, iron bonds glowing red where wooden spars caught fire. From the wreckage stumbled Lord Pinton Rosby, lungs full of smoke, knees giving way before he understood he had knelt. Aegon guided Balerion to rest upon the parapet. Stones screamed, powdered to gravel beneath talons. The Conqueror dismounted, drawing no sword. He set a hand upon the Lord's shoulder, gentle as a father steadying a frightened child. "I claim your fealty," he said, voice low yet carrying to every ear within arrowshot. "Not through mercy, for there will be little of that, but through necessity. Rise when you have accepted." Lord Rosby whimpered, forehead pressed to scorched cobble. I rise." He staggered upright, face speckled with embers. His eyes shone, not wholly with terror now but with something older, the awe men feel standing before a living myth. "Send ravens," Aegon continued. "Tell your neighbors who returned, and tell them what answer they will give when next I darken their skies." He remounted. Balerion leapt, wings hammering the air. Farmsteads miles distant watched a column of dust unravel behind them like a torn banner. None missed the message. Rosby had been spared in body, but the mind of the storm had arrived. In the Red Keep, Grand Maester Aladar spread a half-dozen crumbling parchments across the painted table that served the hand's solar. Candle stubs guttered, casting frantic halos that flared whenever tremors rattled the window lattices. Tremors that had begun with the first sighting of a black dragon over the narrow sea and had not ceased. Across from him, Ser Bernard Buckler, acting Lord Commander of the Goldcloaks, paced with clanking urgency. His gilded helm rested on the stone, visor dented where panicked smallfolk had pelted him with chamber pots the night prior. "The city is chaos," Buckler growled. Rats on a sinking hulk. Half the watch deserted at first glimpse of that beast. The rest want orders. You'd have me tell them, what? That we hold the walls? Against a mountain that breathes fire. Aladar's quill scratched. Walls matter little to dragons, he murmured. Yet order matters to men. We must present some front of resolve, lest panic devour us before dragonfire ever touches stone. He peered through horn-rimmed spectacles. Send heralds. Promise triple pay to any who remain at their posts. Triple pay from which coffers? Buckler barked a humorless laugh. The master of coin fled 2 days ago, took the treasury barge upriver toward Maidenpool. Outside, bells clanged, the sound of funeral processions, though no one marched. Citizens rang them hoping noise alone would wake gods grown deaf. Aladar sighed, rubbing his temples. Then we mint promissory tabs. Ink and seal cost nothing. Before Buckler could retort, a third voice, cool as river ice, intruded. Seal them with what authority? Both men jolted. Princess Daenerys Targaryen, last of her line certain of her blood, stood in the alcove, hair like molten silver falling unbound across a riding cloak. She moved into the chamber with a panther's grace, but exhaustion ringed her violet eyes. At 21, she bore the weight of 9 extinct dragons and a throne now threatened by their progenitor Reborn. Your GR princess, Aladar stammered, rising. I save titles. She slashed air with a dismissive hand. What matters is the city, my city. She turned to Buckler. Recall the watch from the gates. Post them along the riverfront instead. If Aegon means to conquer anew, he will break morale first. He must starve us of hope before he starves us of bread. Keep the ports open, let grain ships land, escort them under banner of truce if need be. Buckler frowned. The sight of gold cloaks riding under white flags might smell of surrender. Better white flags than funeral pyres, she returned. And burn the bells. Their clamor whips fear into frenzy. Order all smithies to melt them down. Forge spearheads if that soothes your pride. Aladar blinked. Destroy the city's bells? Sacred relics, some cast in Baelor's day. Baelor is ash. Her voice softened, but steel-lined each syllable. Traditions will not save us from a dragon that dwarfs tradition. Buckler bowed stiffly. As you command, princess. He turned on heel, cloak snapping like a banner. When the door slammed, Daenerys sagged. For one heartbeat her facade cracked. Aladar hastened forward. Your Highness, by all the 7, you are weary. Sleep. She eased onto a window seat overlooking the courtyards where retainers scurried like ants. Sleep belongs to children, she whispered. I must think as Aegon thinks. What does a conqueror want when he already held the world once? Aegon sought unity, Aladar offered, settling opposite her. Perhaps the realm's fracturing calls him back. She considered. Unity without mercy will birth only rebellion. Yet what if rebellion is his aim? Tear down the realm to raise something harsher. Her gaze drifted northward, toward lands unseen beyond the misted window panes. We must learn his intent before he reaches these walls. And how do we learn intent from legend? She stood, decision kindling behind her eyes. We ask the only souls he may still honor. Wind off the bite tasted of salt and pine sap. On a bluff overlooking White Harbor, a lone figure watched gulls will over churning seas. Lord Cregan Stark, gray in beard but iron-sinewed still, felt each gust like a blade scraping his bones, a reminder that winter waited, patient as memory. He had risen before dawn to oversee work upon the harbor's new stone breakwater, yet his mind now roamed leagues south, chasing rumors borne by merchant sails. My lord, called a voice from the switchback path. A steward hurried up, breath pluming. Raven from Winterfell. He presented the tube, seal broken en route, a smear of black wax. Stark took the parchment, scanning. Few words writ in a trembling hand. Dragonstone rekindled. Aegon returns. Balerion reborn. Bend the knee or burn. No signature. None needed. He crushed the parchment. So it begins again. Turning to the steward, "Saddle Grey Wind." The young man blanched. "My lord, the hour rides late. The east road is swollen from spring thaw." Stark's voice bore northern winter. "Fetch the horse." Within the hour, he galloped along frost-rimmed tracks, banners snapping wolf-gray behind him. He carried with him an oath older than southern crowns, that the north would not kneel save by choice, and choice would be weighed upon honor's scales alone. Night cloaked the castle of Maidenpool in cloistered quiet when Aegon arrived, not on wings, but cloaked and hooded astride a common courser. He had left Balerion coiled around a rugged sea stack 2 leagues away, impossible to spot beneath starlit velvet unless one mistook the rock's silhouette for a gargantuan beast at rest. Even conquerors must sometimes walk as men to gauge the world they intend to reorder. The town gate admitted him without challenge. Travelers still trickled in despite rumors boiling like rot. He paid the toll in old Valyrian silver, coins so rare the guard's eyes widened. Within, Maidenpool streets twisted in lanes narrow as burrows, lit by tallow lanterns that pitched shadows across shuttered brothels and boarded alehouses. Ascetics wandered, preaching repentance lest new dragonfire reenact Valyria's doom. Yet most folk clung to toil over theology, stacking saltfish crates for dawn wagons, bartering goose down for barley. Aegon moved unseen, reading their faces. Fear rode them, aye, but life persisted, stubborn weed through cobble. He admired that. Fear that bends without snapping is clay a potter can shape. He found the tavern called the Slattern Smile, nothing but a low beam-hung hall reeking of sour wine. Inside, 3 hedge knights argued over cards, armor piled at their feet like discarded shells. A minstrel picked a sad tune none heard. Behind the counter, a plump madam polished pewter mugs with a rag already black. She glanced up as Aegon approached. "Room?" she asked, voice flat from exhaustion. "Information," he replied, dropping a silver stag. Metal rang. Her eyes narrowed. "That buys words. Speak your question. Who rules these lands now that rumor unseats kings?" She snorted. "Rumors ruled longer than any king. But if you mean lords, Maidenpool bends to House Mutun still. God save them. Lord Mutun fled with the king's master of coin. They say toward the trident, or bravos if coin holds." Aegon traced the rim of his mug. "And the realm? If a dragon truly returns, whom do the small folk fear more? The beast, or those who would claim to protect them?" She leaned in, elbows squeaking on oaken boards. "Us small folk learned long ago that when lords battle, fields burn. Dragon or lion, stag or wolf, all leave ash the same. But a dragon offers swift death. A lord's war starves children." Her gaze hardened as she realized what she'd said to a stranger. "You ask dangerous questions. I seek only truth," Aegon said, rising. He left 3 more coins. "For ashes cannot grow a realm, and fear alone will not feed it." Outside, mist thickened. He made for the seaside terraces where salt spray cooled stone. There he found Balerion already stirring, sensing his rider's unease. Moonlight glanced off scales, revealing beneath them motes of molten gold, like constellations trapped beneath black glass. Aegon rested a palm upon the massive jaw. "They have forgotten, old friend. Not the dread that memory festers. They forgot why we built the realm." The dragon's eyes, each larger than a shield, reflected starfields. A rumble answered, agreement or hunger, impossible to parse. "We rebuild, but differently. Fire forged the first realm. Perhaps flame can temper this one." He swung into the saddle. "Come. King's Landing awaits its judgment. But first, we call the banners of the Reach." Balerion's ascent sucked fog into a spinning vortex. Watchmen on turret walks fell to their backs as wind slammed them flat. In the harbor, ships bobbed violently. Several snapped moorings, drifting seaward like toys. From the sky, Maidenpool shrank to a flickering candle set in dunes. And further south, beyond river deltas glimmering under fractured moonlight, stretched verdant fields ripe for harvest, and ripe for fire. Highgarden's ramparts glowed rosy in afternoon sun, When the first plumes appeared on the horizon, black streaks sliding across blue like ink spilled upon parchment. Lord Meryn Tyrell, Rose Lion of the Reach, squinted from his balcony. Battle banners? No, smoke pillars too evenly spaced for campfires, yet too thin for wildfires. He summoned a maester, but before ravens could flutter into their tower, a roar split the sky. Shadows consumed sunlight, courtiers screamed. Rose gardens wilted under a sudden furnace blast that hovered without touching bloom. From the western rampart, a sworn shield vomited down his breastplate at the size of what emerged. Wings stretching clear across the mander's breadth, a belly scaled like cathedral obsidian, teeth so vast a man could sheathe a long sword within each grin. Balerion descended upon Highgarden as if to claim the keep entire, but halted 10 spear lengths above the tallest turret, hovering in cyclonic thunder. Aegon's voice crashed over parapets. Meryn Tyrell, Lord Paramount of the Reach, stand forth. Lord Tyrell, shaking, stepped to view. He held no sword, such would mock the ratio of power, and forced a bow deep as age-bent oak. King Aegon, if you yet claim the title, Highgarden greets you. Greet me with fidelity, Aegon replied, hovering upon a beast whose yawns exhaled embers. Your house once knelt. Kneel again, and I grant stewardship of these lands renewed. Gainsay me, and the Reach becomes barren memory. Meryn swallowed. Pride warred with survival, but behind him he felt the weight of thousands. Farmers whose harvests fed half the realm, small folk who could not outrun dragonfire. He bowed until forehead kissed stone. Highgarden bends the knee. A cheer rose, part relief, part shock, among courtiers. Flower petals torn from breeze scattered into updraft, swirling around Balerion like crimson snow. The dragon roared once, an exclamation mark. Fields beyond the walls rippled, wheat heads lying flat. Aegon nodded. Rise, Lord Tyrell. Assemble your levies. Carve notches into your hearts for each oathbreaker you drag to heel. The harvest of rebellion starts tomorrow. He banked away, wind-ripped banners clean off poles. In his wake, Highgarden rang with silence broken only by petals drifting to earth, some aflame, burning fragile as promises. Days blurred into fiery chords across the map of Westeros. At Bitterbridge, lords rallied to Tyrell's summons, only to find the Conqueror himself waiting, perched upon the Black Dread atop a hill scorched bare. They knelt. At Tumbleton, would-be rebels raised walls of wagons soaked in pitch. Balerion's breath vaporized them into floating glass. They knelt amid shards. At Old Oak and Golden Grove, knights gathered before sunrise to debate allegiance. By midday their banners flew double, house sigils entwined with the three-headed dragon. Yet conquest was no mere exercise of dread. Each capitulation was followed by decree. Granaries stocked under crown seal, roads patrolled by mixed levies to deter banditry, maesters assigned to tally grain tithes with honest ledgers. Word spread that the dragon's shadow meant not only terror. It delivered grain to starving towns bypassed by corrupt bailiffs, punished knights who raped small folk, hanged tax collectors who pocketed coin. Fear bent knee, justice bound it. Still, not all hearts softened. Ravens from the Stormlands bore challenge. Lord Argilac Baratheon, great-grandson of the last Storm King, spurned Aegon's summons, proclaiming no storm would bow to dragon wind. Aegon smiled at the raven's insolent scrawl. Very well, he murmured to the bird before releasing it. Let the storm meet the fire. In the dungeons beneath King's Landing, Princess Daenerys moved ghost-silent past sleeping jailers. She carried no torch, trusting memory of passages walked as a girl chasing kittens. She reached a rust-eaten door banded with iron. 2 unsullied stood sentinel, last gift from an associate ally, purchased at ruinous cost. They opened the door at her nod. Within, a cell barely larger than a box held a man cowled in oily chains. Dark hair matted across a bruised brow, grime-coated cheeks once clean-shaven. Yet his eyes still blazed cunning. Corlys Waters, bastard scholar, alchemist rumored to read Valyrian glyphs as easily as most men read tavern signs. Daenerys stepped inside. The stench of damp straw curled her nose. Corlys grinned, showing chipped teeth. Dragon Queen without a crown, he rasped. Come to consult the worm you cast into darkness? She knelt, unlocked one manacle. I come to ask. Ask? A royal curiosity. You studied dragon lore before your treasons. He rubbed Ro's wrist. Before your mother's council called it treason to seek knowledge beyond script they fed us, yes. Aegon rides again. Balerion reborn larger than pyres tell. I must know. Is such might truly invulnerable? Corlys' laugh was a cough. Invulnerability is a child's fable. Every beast bears a flaw, scale unset. I blind. The question is whether mortals may pry at that flaw. He fixed her with pupils black as pitch. Dragons grow stronger with age, you know. Their scales thicken, but beneath scale lies flesh. Older dragons seldom molt. Beneath old rings, new scale cannot grow. One might find ridges brittle under heat or cold extremes. But Balerion, that beast devoured kings. His age beggars centuries. Daenerys leaned closer. Can wildfire harm him? Wildfire harms all, Corlys whispered. The trick is delivery. Green fire clings, yes, but only if you drench him. A splash will scorch scales but not penetrate. And Balerion's breath is hotter still. Ignite wildfire near his maw, you risk feeding him. She exhaled. Valyrian steel? Corlys shrugged chains. A spear of it, driven between scales at wing joint perhaps. But you need reach, strength, surprise. Imagine hoisting a needle against a mountain. She closed her eyes, remembering songs of Aegon's sisters diving upon enemy lords, driving spears between helm and gorget. Courage mattered, yet courage needed hope to bloom. If there is no flaw, she said softly, the realm dies. Corlys tipped his head. Then birth a flaw. Dragons are creatures of fire, yet wind twists flame. Lure him high, where air thins and cold bites. Dragons dislike the cold. They are furnaces that cool quickly. He smiled slyly. Find a way to chain the wind itself. Daenerys rose. Chain the wind. Release me, Corlys called as she turned. I will aid you. Chains rust, knowledge survives. She paused outside the threshold. Aid is not bargain enough for treason forgiven. What then? Freedom? No, she said, steady. Redemption. She signaled the Unsullied. They unlocked the other manacle. Serve your realm, and perhaps you will serve yourself. Ravens carried letters sealed with the sigil of 3 heads crowned by flame to every corner of Westeros. But a single raven, its leg bound by 2 ribbons, black and white, flew farther, across the shivering sea to the citadel of Loreth. There, within archives older than Valyria, a scroll lay dormant, speaking of a sorcery lost to doom. Nets of cold forged from shadow and moonstone, nets once cast high to ensnare the smaller dragons of the lesser Valyrian houses. No man yet living had woven such a net, but knowledge, once stirred, spreads like sparks on dry grass. Daenerys' covert agents scoured dockside warehouses for moonstone shipments. Smuggled crates vanished into the Red Keep at midnight. In hidden forges below the city, alchemists hammered thin rings of dusk-black ore, chanting in Valyrian while Corlys traced glyphs of binding. Each ring drank heat, frosting anvils with rhyme. They forged thousands, linking them until the chain net sprawled across the flagstones like a frozen sea. When complete, the net hissed on contact with torchlight. Embers died upon its links. Wind and iron, Corlys murmured, awestruck. Now we must hurl it skyward. How does one loft a net the size of a city square? Daenerys commanded the building of trebuchets upon the mud gate towers. Engineers groaned at the weight, but gold bought genius. Counterweights filled with lead and bricks of sepstone swung against the sky. Chain bundles coiled upon platforms like sleeping sea serpents, ready to fling frost-kissed dread into the path of living fire. On the 15th day of their march from the Reach, Aegon's host crested the hill called Rhaenys' View, where legend held his sister once surveyed the growing city. Now 20,000 spears bristled behind him, banners of sun and rose, stag and crane, houses bent in a week's conquest. Farmers drove ox carts stacked with grain. Smiths wheeled traveling forges to shoe horses. Camp followers sang low songs of inevitable tide. From the saddle, Aegon watched kings landing beyond the Blackwater. Walls gleamed freshly white, the fruit of decades of expansion. Masts cluttered the harbor, yet bells did not ring. Smoke of daily hearths drifted but faint. The city seemed to hold its breath. At his side rode Lord Tyrell, armor polished bright enough to catch the sun. "They prepare for siege," he observed.
"No," Aegon corrected.
"They prepare for spectacle." He dismounted. "Hold the army here. I will offer parley." Tyrell gaped. "Alone? They may kill you." Aegon laughed softly. "They may try." Balerion knelt. Aegon climbed atop. The dragon leapt into cloudless blue, army cheering thunder beneath. King's Landing watched the black dread descend like a total eclipse. Yet this time, Balerion slowed above the mud gate, circling once, twice, teasing the skyline. On the third pass, trebuchets atop the gate towers unleashed. 5 immense arms swung outward, flinging bundled nets of moonstone chain high. The nets unfurled, shimmering ghost silver. Wind screamed as frost met inferno. Chain links exploded into vapor where dragonfire licked them, but cold fused to heat, dragging flame into tongues of glassy steam. One bundle struck Balerion's right wing, wrapping along the leading edge. Frost burst across scales. The great beast howled, a sound no man alive had heard. Wing beats faltered, air convulsed. Aegon sensed agony ripple along the dragon's nerves. He leaned forward, whispering words of calm. But more nets hurled upward. 2 wrapped his tail, pulling hard. Balerion bucked, claws raking sky. Trebuchet crews rearmed. Chains rattled into cups. Aegon's hand caressed a ridge as broad as a mast. "Enough," he muttered. The black dread rolled, twisting nets into useless tangles, then plunged, jaws opening. A plume of black-red fire washed over the mud gate, melting copper sheathing, vaporizing wooden braces. Stone flowed like candle wax. The trebuchets became silhouettes, then memory. Daenerys watched from the tower of the hand, heart hammering. The net had struck, but Balerion lived. She turned to Corlys, white-faced. "Again, there are no more," he whispered. Metal exhausted. In the courtyard, unsullied formed shield walls. Gold cloaks rallied, but their courage wavered as Aegon guided the dragon into a hovering standoff above the Red Keep. Flames roiled along his throat, ready but withheld. Aegon's voice boomed.
"Daenerys Targaryen stand forth."
She emerged onto a battlement, alone, cloak whipped about slender frame. "I stand," she called, forcing clarity. "Will you meet under flags of peace?" he asked. No mockery, only grave offer. She nodded. "I will." He commanded Balerion to alight upon the courtyard. Stone buckled again, but he slid from saddle, walking forward unarmed. She descended, boots echoing on steps still trembling. They met within arrow range of 60 archers who feared releasing bows might doom the city. They studied one another, old king reborn, young queen untested. Wind tugged her hair across her cheeks. He saw in her eyes legacy's fire, nearly his own. "The realm fractures," he said. "I come to mend it." "With fire?" she asked. "With order," he returned. "Order born of terror is brittle," she warned. "Break the small folk and you break your realm's spine." He considered. "I will break only those who lead them astray." "Then rule with me," she ventured. "Guide my reign instead of stealing it. Teach, do not raise." Shock flickered behind his calm. None had dared offer partnership. Yet she held her ground, a sapling bending yet rooted. He sensed in her the realm's living heart. Frightened, yes, but beating still. Behind them, Balerion growled as frost chains shimmered into steam and fell away in brittle flakes. Proof that even dread may bleed. Aegon extended a hand. "Show me your city, and I will show you how to guard it." She reached, hesitated, then clasped his gauntlet. Heat met cool flesh. Above, clouds parted. releasing a shaft of late afternoon sun that painted melted stone gold. From towers and hovels alike, thousands watched their clasp and dared, for the first time in weeks, to exhale. That night, council fires burned in the Maiden Vault. Lords newly conquered rode in under safeguards, minds bristling with unasked dread. Maesters scribbled annexes to annals faster than quills could drink ink. In the street markets, rumor outpaced coin. The Dragon King and Dragon Queen would rule together. The war was over. The war had only begun. Children fashioned wooden wings, leaping off crates while shrieking triumph. Somewhere, an old septon lifted hands toward a sky strangely clear and thanked absent gods for mercy they did not yet comprehend. In the hush before dawn, Aegon climbed the steps of the throne dais alone. He did not sit. Instead, he touched the sword hilts welded by ancient fire, feeling their chill bite. He whispered something the steel alone could hear. When he withdrew, new runes shimmered across several blades, a promise sealed in Balerion glyphs signifying unity forged anew. Outside, the city bells, those not melted, lay silent still, but the hush felt expectant now, not fearful. Beyond the harbor, the black dread dozed upon Dragonstone's cliffs, smoke curling from crater-like nostrils. Wounded, yet unbeaten, scales cooling under moon. Far to the north, Lord Cregan Stark crossed the neck beneath banners of grey direwolves marching southward, not to kneel but to judge. In the Stormlands, Argilax's hosts mustered behind rain-lashed bastions, hungry to test spear against flame. Across the narrow sea, the free cities weighed coin chests, sensing markets shift like tides. The age of complacent crowns had shattered. Shards lay strewn upon roads soon to run with both blood and seed. And in a narrow forge beneath King's Landing, Corlys Waters quenched a dagger of moonstone in a bath of wildfire, watching green flames dance across its edge. Knowledge survives, he mused, and waits for its moment. The 5 Kingdom years, historians would later call this span. An era when fire courted frost, when dragons learned to fear nets of wind, and when a realm tempered by nightmare was reborn not in ash alone, but in that fragile alloy of mercy and might that only the bold dare wield. But for now, dawn broke quiet over Blackwater Bay, painting the city in hues of rose and gold. Fishermen tested nets still warm from dragon flame. Bakers lit ovens. Life resumed, tentative yet stubborn. Somewhere, a child looked skyward at the distant silhouette of Balerion coiled about Dragonstone's peak and felt not dread but wonder. And in that wonder lay the promise that conquest, tempered by compassion, might yet birth a realm fit for all its children, dragon and lamb alike. The Blackwater lapped against breakwaters newly raised from quarried limestone, waves sighing like tired giants into clefts between the jutting stones. Smoke from 1,000 braziers drifted aloft, mingling with the richer scents of roasting boar, the acrid tang of smelters, and the briny musk of ebb tide. Atop the tallest tower of Maegor's Holdfast, Daenerys Targaryen stood alone, watching torchlight glimmer upon the river's skin like scattered coins. Below, the city murmured, an endless susurrus of carts creaking along torchlit lanes, smiths hammering as if racing the dawn, hawkers barking saltfish at soldiers who would sail at sunrise. Fear still haunted every eve, but discipline had replaced panic. She had spent the day inspecting trebuchet wreckage where Balerion's fire had melted rock into glass and fused copper beams into grotesque ribbons. The devastation humbled her, yet she felt no regret for the attempt. Yesterday, King's Landing had proven itself capable of resistance, however fleeting. That knowledge weighed heavy but granted leverage in negotiation with a legend. Behind her came measured steps. Aegon appeared, cloak snapping in the river wind. Lamplight shivered across his features. High cheekbones, eyes as cool and watchful as moonlit water. He offered silent greeting, remaining at polite distance, as though the air between them were a wound not yet healed. "Balerion sleeps?" she asked without turning. "He dreams of far older skies," Aegon replied. The chain's chill vexed him. Dragons remember pain keenly. "I regret his suffering," she said, "but I will use every means to spare my people." "As would I." He joined her at the parapet, Yet smoke and steel cannot alone forge peace. We must temper fear with hope. Let them see we walk the same ramparts. She studied him sideways. The realm knows only dread of dragons. How do we conjure hope from their shadow? By governing swiftly. We will address the small council at sunrise. We will declare grain levies halved for 1 year. Armsmen who pillage will lose hands. Lords who starve small folk will lose lands. Daenerys' brow arched. These decrees come before we have bent half the realm. They come exactly because we have not, he answered. Mercy offered in victory smells of calculation. Mercy offered while war yet hovers reads as intent. She followed his gaze across the dark plain where encampments of reach levies ringed the city in flickering constellations. Not all will applaud. Tyrell will bridle at grain remissions. Lannister coffers bleed coin to feed other mouths. If they bridle, remind them that a dragon's roar may scorch ledgers as easily as fields. The faintest smile cracked his gravity. And yet, between us, I hope roar proves unnecessary. Wind moaned through crenels. Below, the river slapped pilings. She shivered. Night carried stillness, but somewhere far across fields, war drums boomed faintly, stormlanders mustering. She spoke soft. Argilac Baratheon marches under blackened banners. He styles himself Storm King Reborn. No king stands long before storm of fire, Aegon murmured. Yet the Baratheons are proud. I would break Argilac's sword, not his bloodline. He will not kneel. Then he will bend or burn. The words were matter of fact, sorrow threading the cadence. But first we try parley. She turned fully, searching his face. Is that sorrow I hear? Duty. A pause. But yes, sorrow too. I did not return to pave roads with corpses. I returned to crown a future stronger than the past. War is hammer and anvil. Use them sparingly lest the blade shatter. Silence stretched, filled by dripping dew. At length Daenerys nodded. Then let tomorrow craft policy, not pyres. Argilac Baratheon rode ahead of 12,000 men. Hoofs churning wet sand where the King's Road skirted storm-whipped coast. Thunderheads bruised the horizon. Lightning forked green and white upon distant surf, throwing his host into stark relief. Pikes jutting like a forest uprooted, banners emblazoned with crowned stags snapping against gale. Argilac, helmless that his men might see unbowed features, raised a mailed fist whenever a crack of lightning revealed him. Cheers answered, wrath-throated. He knew dragons could not be slain by courage alone, but courage was a seed from which cunning sprouted. Ravens had reached him of King's Landing's failed net, and of Balerion's frost scar. Dragons bleed. If cold could bite fire, perhaps wind and rain could drown it. Storm's End had stood against Aegon's sisters once, refusing surrender until rain ceased and winds stilled. Let the storm stand again. That night, they made camp upon a ridge overlooking sowing fields flattened by gale. Argilac walked among the cook fires, clasping shoulders, sharing coarse bread. He spoke of ancestors who defied doom itself. Men laughed at his jests, roared at his vows, drank greedily of spiced cider as wind keened round tents. Yet few found sleep. Every gust seemed to carry distant wing beats. Deep in the darkest watch, drums ceased. Talk turned to murmurs. A low hum crept across the camp. Strange susurration that had no wind's direction. A scout burst into Argilac's pavilion. Mud splattered across face like war paint. My lord! He collapsed to one knee. Shadow across the moon, bigger than keep walls. Argilac strode outside. Clouds skittered, revealing a pale crescent. For a breath the heavens cleared, and there, etched against white, glided a silhouette grander than nightmare. Not Balerion. Wings narrower, tail barbed like a scorpion's spine. Flame trailed occasional from slitted jaws. Argilac's breath caught. A second dragon? His spies had confirmed none. Torches flared as men pointed skyward. Someone screamed the ancient Valyrian word for death. The dragon wheeled once, descending not upon them but toward a hillside 2 leagues off, talons grasping something. An ox perhaps, then vanished behind ridge line. Silence thickened like honey. Argilac placed a gauntlet over heart, steadying fury. Fire from one direction was dread. Fire from two was apocalypse. Yet storms seldom bowed to fire. He straightened, voice booming. We march at dawn. Fear feeds dragons. We starve them. Sable clouds shredded at morning. Rain came in slanting sheets. Aegon stood before his host assembled on the Rose Road miles southwest of the capital, 40,000 now, as lords from the Narrow Sea and Crackclaw joined Tyrell's columns. The ground had turned to pulp beneath rows of hobnailed boots, but men stood resolute. Drums thumped fat rhythms. Trumpets' brassy peal rolled through rain like the call of mythic beasts. Aegon addressed them from Balerion's shoulder, voice carrying despite storm. You march not to conquer bread and wine, but to weld kingdom to kingdom. Stormlanders are brothers sundered by pride. We meet them as smith meets steel, firm, yet focused. Spare small folk, punish cruelty, honor courage. Helm crested with dark steel, he looked every inch the storm-sired warlord. If Argilac kneels, embrace him. If he fights, show him fire's mercy. Swift and sure, the host answered with spear-pounding roar. Balerion lifted, wings hurling waves of spray that bent banners. He banked low, guiding the vanguard down churned roads where water swirled ankle-deep. To each side, hedges of wet rose petals clung hopelessly to thorns, a banner of the Reach humbled by weather it could not charm. By midday they reached Bronzegate, a keep once loyal to crown but swayed by storm. Its drawbridge remained up, portcullis spiked with iron tongues. Aegon landed beyond arrow range, beckoned Lord Tyrell and Lady Celtigar to review. Rain hissed upon Balerion's scales. Steam rose from heated hide. An envoy emerged under white flag. Ser Galtry fell, gaunt and sodden. He knelt knee-deep in mud. Bronzegate holds for Argilac Baratheon, he declared. We respect your power, but we will not open gates until Argilac decides. Aegon studied walls, narrow battlements, ancient stone patched with oak braces to resist siege engines. Tell your lord I respect loyalty, he said. Return by dusk and declare his answer. If he refuses parley, I will free you from loyalty's burden. Fell paled. Dragon fire? Choice, Aegon corrected. Fire is merely conversation's last verse. Fell rode back, cloak plastered to hauberk. Dusk descended violet beneath bruised clouds. No answer came. At nightfall, Aegon summoned Corlys Waters, who had traveled with baggage train. The alchemist arrived hooded, face grim. Your cold works, Aegon asked. Can they be wrought lesser scale for arrows? Corlys lifted a small coffer, revealing bolts tipped with slivers of moonstone encased in glass. Break the glass, air touches, or heat flees, leaving shards colder than winter water. Aegon nodded. Fletch 200. Wing guards will loose at walls come morning. No civilians remain within. Tyrell answered. Scouts say Argilac evacuated Smallfolk days ago. Only garrison remains. Then we test ice. Aegon dismissed counsel. He sat alone with Balerion beside a watchfire, steam curling. Rain had eased to mist. He brushed the dragon's wounded wing where nets had bitten. Silver scars traced the cartilage. Balerion rumbled. Soon you'll heal, Aegon whispered, and soon you'll face winds fiercer. In the distance thunder muttered, as though concurring. First light revealed Bronzegate's walls gleaming wet. Aegon's archers notched icy quarrels. At his signal, 20 ballistae thrummed. Bolts arced through rain, glass capsules shattering upon impact. Moonstone tips pierced crenels. Frost blossomed along stone, spreading like white moss. Arrows rained from battlements in reply, but many snapped mid-flight, shafts brittle from sudden cold. Soldiers atop walls found footing treacherous. Leather sawls froze to stone. Tower joints creaked alarmingly. Aegon raised gauntlet. Balerion opened jaws. Flame inhaled mightily met walls already brittle. Where fire struck frost-slick stone, masonry exploded outward. Parapets sheared free like rotten bark. Whole sections crumbled. garrison tumbling into Bailey amid hissing shards. The portcullis chain snapped, drawbridge crashed. Trumpets of surrender blasted from inner ward. Aegon signaled cease. "Offer pardon," he ordered Tyrell. "Garrison to lay down arms, officers bound by parole. They will march behind us toward Storm's End under our banner." So Bronzegate fell with fewer than 30 dead. Word flew up the King's Road swifter than ravens. 2 days later, near Fellwood, the armies met. Argilax on high ground sheltered by sloping pine, Aegon's upon muddy plain. Rain abated, but wind still whipped. Between them stretched 2 furlongs of churned earth and battered heather. Argilac rode forward under striped banner of gold-crowned stag. Aegon descended atop Balerion, landing hard enough to send ripples across puddled ground. Argilac raised visor. "Dragon Lord," he called. "The Stormlands bow to no foreign yoke." Aegon's reply came calm. "Your line sprang from Valyrian seed, Argilac. You are no stranger to dragon blood. Kneel and retain Storm's End." Argilac laughed, rainwater streaming from beard. "Storm's End kneels only to the gods of sky and sea. Your wings will tatter in their quarrel. Kneel, Argilac, and we unite against winters to come," Aegon urged. "Refuse, and I bury Storm beneath stone." Argilac's sapphire eyes narrowed. "A man who would rule by fear deserves none." He drew sword, raising it high. "Let the storm break black dread." He wheeled. Horns blared. Baratheon spears advanced downhill, shields rippling. Lightning cracked behind them, silhouettes stark as carvings. Aegon vaulted astride. Balerion lunged skyward, yet Aegon held him from flame. Infantry clashed first. Tyrell knights receiving charge with braced lances. Rain-slick ground turned to mire. Horses screamed. Men vanished beneath hooves. Baratheon berserkers flung axes at Balerion overhead, crude missiles that pinged harmless from scales. Aegon waited. He watched Argilac drive wedge deep, banner pressing Tyrell center. Thunder boomed. Then he dove. Balerion's jaws parted. But instead of fire, he exhaled a gust, superheated wind that churned mud to steaming slurry. Baratheon spearmen staggered, foothold lost. Reach crossbowmen loosed cold-tipped bolts into swirling steam. Where moonstone struck mail, frost flashed, locking joints. Men toppled, unable to rise. Argilac fought toward Balerion, sword flashing white in gloom. Aegon guided the dragon low. Argilac leapt, blade striking a scarred scale. Sparks flew, but scale held. Balerion's tail swept, hurling horse and rider aside like driftwood. Argilac tumbled, helm wrenching loose. He rose, blood streaming from brow, glaring defiance. "End me," he growled. Aegon dismounted, drew Blackfire, ancestral sword. Rain hissed upon its dark steel. "Yield," he offered. "Live to serve your people." "I serve them best in death," Argilac spat. He charged. Their blades clashed. Though older, Argilac's strength matched youth with fury. Sparks flew in sheets. Yet Aegon moved with measured economy, parrying high slash, riposting low. At last he bound Argilac's sword, sliding up into disarm. Hilt struck jaw, staggering the Storm Lord. Aegon pivoted, pommel crashing into temple. Argilac collapsed to knees. A hush fell across battlefield. Even Balerion stilled. Aegon lifted sword point to Argilac's throat. Rain drummed upon steel. "Yield," he repeated. Argilac's eyes flicked toward his tattered host, half routed, others kneeling. He closed lids, exhaled. "I yield," he whispered. Mud swallowed the word, but thunder heard. A cheer rose first from Tyrell ranks, then from stormmen who saw their lord spared. Aegon sheathed Blackfire, extended a hand. Argilac grasped it. At that clasp, lightning forked overhead, gilding both faces as if gods recorded covenant. In the aftermath, Aegon commanded that Stormlander wounded receive equal care. Tyrell surgeons stitched Baratheon flesh. Reach carpenters helped mend wagons for enemy return. Argilac's banners were not cast down but hung beside the three-headed dragon. edges draped in black to mark capitulation with honor. Aegon and Argilac rode together into Storm's End 3 days later. The high drum towers boomed salute not of surrender but of rebirth. Inside the shield-shaped hall, Argilac knelt before Blackfyre and swore new fealty. His daughter, Lady Arlan, watchers whispered, smiled at Aegon in a way that spoke of dynastic possibilities. Aegon noticed but made no pledge. His eyes drifted to Daenerys standing at his left, and something unspoken welded stronger than sigils. Far away, in the north, Lord Cregan Stark reached the last hearth where umber men brewed ale dark as peat. Rumors of Argilac's bend reached him in the yard. He considered long at the hearth fire, palm hovering above embers. The realm reshaped itself swiftly, faster than ice melts. Should the north wait for fire to reach the wall, or ride south and carve a treaty while honor still carried weight? He called his captains, mapping marches south by east. Yet snow began to fall, first flakes of early winter, months ahead of schedule. Ravens from Eastwatch spoke of dead things on shattered shores, whites glimpsed in moonless hours. Cregan felt dread older than dragons creeping from memory of long night. Could fire prove ally against frost? He dispatched a raven to Dragonstone addressed to Aegon Targaryen. The letter bore sealed vow. The North would treat with Dragon King at Harrenhal come winter's turn. Inside, he folded a shard of obsidian chipped from the first keep's foundation. A gift and a warning. Within King's Landing, Corlys Waters oversaw experiments in the Black Cells. He had convinced Daenerys and Aegon to sanction limited alchemical study of wildfire fused with moonstone dust. Volatile vials were lowered into rain barrels, then ignited under cold iron lids. Results produced bursts not of flame but of wind so bitterly freezing that water crusted into blue shards across cell walls. Corlys named it Winterfire. Aegon watched one such trial, fascination crossing stern brow. This frost you birth, he mused, may temper dragons more than nets. It may also cool hearts aflame with rebellion, Corlys answered. Daenerys frowned. A weapon of last resort. Aegon nodded. Balanced sword with shield. Yet knowledge untested rusts. Craft 10 canisters. We pray never to open them. For the realm, months slipped by measured in harvest wagons and hammerstrokes rebuilding gates. Highgarden's granaries sent caravans to Crownlands. Old Town dispatched zealots preaching that the dragon's mercy signaled divine writ. Gulltown reopened after pirate lords bent knee, their galleys now escorting grain. But peace bore cracks. Across the narrow sea, the Triarchs of Volantis convened, alarmed that a united Westeros under ancient Dragonlord might threaten trade lanes. Envoys to Pentos whispered of funding exiles skilled in Scorpion Bolt design. In Bravos, faceless men found coin upon their temple steps. 3 iron chests stamped wit. H-crowned stag, golden rose, and kraken. Names were spoken. Faces purchased. One name, Daenerys Targaryen. Another, Corlys Waters. A third, Aegon himself. The many-faced god accepted all faces. One crisp morning, Daenerys strolled the godswood planted behind Maegor's holdfast centuries earlier. Imported weirwood that never thrived, its sap pale and sorrowful. She trod brittle leaves, pondering letters from Dorne refusing attendance at any southern council while dragons lived. Leaves rustled. She glimpsed movement beyond thin trunk. A cloaked figure knelt, blade glinting. She gasped. The figure sprang, silent, sinuous. Assassin. Instinct honed by months of peril snapped her to motion. She flung herself sideways. The blade hissed past cheek, nicking ear. She rolled, tugging dagger from boot, but the assassin lunged anew. Stiletto aimed for throat. A roar shattered birdsong. Shadow engulfed godswood. Balerion, roused from rest atop the keep, dropping like thunder-wrought mountain. Assassin faltered as vast black form descended. Talons crushed marble bench, missing by yards but enough. Daenerys stabbed upward. Edge scraped ribs. Assassin staggered. Balerion's head snaked, jaws closing. No scream escaped. Only crunch, then silence. Aegon arrived breathless, sword half-drawn. He saw blood spattered across Daenerys' cheek, the corpse half hidden beneath dragon maw, and something inside him cracked like thin ice. He crossed, cupped her face, eyes blazing. "Are you hurt?" "Scratch," she whispered, shaking. "The dragon." She looked to Balerion, who huffed, nostrils flaring steam scented with copper. "He guards what is mine," Aegon said. He realized the weight of words, possession implied, yet she did not recoil. She leaned into his hand, breath sinking. Aegon lifted gaze to corpse. Cloak bore sigil of no known house. Coin purse contained Bravosi crescents. Fury ignited. "Our peace invites daggers from shadows. We must finish forging realm before foreign blades find more cracks." Daenerys nodded. "Begin with the north. Their pledge awaits." Aegon agreed. Harrenhal in 3 moons. He turned eyes to horizon, where crows wheeled above charred towers still haunted by black heron screams. Fate loved circles, it seemed. Time to close this one with iron handshake. The ride north began with pageantry. Aegon and Daenerys rode abreast upon Balerion's broad back. Queen no longer spectator but partner. Behind them marched a retinue balanced between Reach Knights and Stormland Spearmen, each banner stitched into new design. 3-headed dragon quartered with crowned stag, half-wreathed in rose. Common folk lined roads, some dropping to knees, others cheering with cups raised high. Not all voices praised. Whispers in taverns muttered of dragon tyranny reborn, but such whispers faded when grain prices fell and highway brigands hung from forks of the King's Road. At Maidenpool, the tavern keeper who had once exchanged coins with Aegon greeted the procession with barrels of ale. She pressed a loaf into Daenerys' hands. "For making him human," she said. Daenerys smiled, tucking warm bread under cloak. A moon's travel brought them to Harrenhal, the ruin vast as a dead titan's skull. Blackened towers pierced mist, their melted stone walls glistening like slag. Fires lit within the king's hearthroom struggled against vaulted gloom. Lords arrived. Cregan Stark swathed in grey furs. Lady Sabetha Lannister, eyes hard as coin. Prince Carl Corgyle of Dorne, unexpected but curious. Lord Samwell Tully representing Riverland's frail after endless wars. They gathered around the ashes of Heron's folly, symbol apt. Aegon addressed assembly. "I ask not for blind fealty. I ask for covenant. Each realm shares burdens, reaps harvest. Taxes shall rebuild roads, fund watches north and south. Small council seats allotted by strength of grain and steel, not birth alone. A charter will codify rights of lord and peasant, the dragon's law. I seek signatories." Murmurs rippled. Cregan Stark stepped forward. "Dragon's law rings fine words," he intoned, voice rumbling low. "Yet ice remembers fire's cruelty. Swear before gods old and new that your dragons will never again burn innocent hearths." Aegon unsheathed Blackfire, placed the flat against palm, and sliced a neat line. Blood welled. He let droplets hiss upon cracked stone. "I so swear." He looked to Daenerys. She drew her dagger, mirrored gesture. Their mingled blood pooled, steam curling. Balerion roared outside, a grunt of approval. Cregan nodded, unsheathed ice steel sword. Others followed. One by one they cut palms, letting blood mix upon Heron's floor, old foundation christened anew. But oaths seldom proceed unchallenged. Night deepened, feast ensued. Laughter rose in ruined hall, yet tension lurked. Corlys Waters paced shadows, eyes alert. He sensed movement. Glint of metal near balcony high above dais. Too quick. A bowstring? He shouted warning. Arrow whistled down. Aegon turned. Shaft struck armor seam at collar. Moonstone tips snapping on steel, but glass capsule burst, vaporizing heat, flesh freezing to ice. Aegon staggered. Daenerys cried out, catching him. Pandemonium erupted. Assassin above loosed second arrow at Daenerys. Balerion crashed through hall roof in explosion of timbers. Arrow deflected by falling beam. Assassin fled along rafters, but Northmen loosed axes that shattered wood. He fell, lithe as cat, rolled, sprinted, only to meet Corlys who flung vial of winterfire. Frost gust engulfed assassin. Flesh froze, shards crumbling. Silence smothered hall save splintered wood still dropping. Daenerys pressed cloak to Aegon's wound. Ice rhymed fabric. Cregan knelt, slid fingers beneath armor, feeling pulse faint. "We need heat," he growled. Balerion lowered immense head. Nostrils cast breath warm as summer. Corlys produced vial of wildfire diluted for healing, green flame that warmed but did not burn. He painted salve around wound. Ice melted, steam rolling. Aegon's eyes fluttered open. "Assassins aim true," he rasped.
No, Daenerys insisted.
"Not today." Cregan glared at lords around. Who hired Bravosi? No one confessed. But Lady Lannister's gaze slid sideways. Corgyle's fingers drummed. Suspicion seeded. Aegon struggled upright. Enough! He gripped Blackfire, slammed hilt to stone. "Whoever seeks chaos will find only wrath. We sign charter at dawn. Any lord absent shall be declared enemy of the realm." Blood and ice lines crusted wound, but fire blazed in eyes. Cregan stood behind him, Daenerys at his side. Balerion's shadow cloaked hall. Lords weighed survival. At dawn, each signed. Moon waned. Winter's breath thickened. Ravens carried Dragon's law across Westeros. Some hailed it. Some plotted beneath darkened banners. In the citadel of Old Town, archmesters debated precedent. In the stepstones, sell-sail captains measured profit from civil war brewing east. In the narrow sea, black sails of ironborn reavers gathered, seeing mainland distracted. Upon Dragonstone's wind-scoured heights, Balerion roared into night. Wound healing, pride intact, though from neck to wing-base silver scar glimmered. A reminder dragons are not gods. In a lantern-lit chamber below, Aegon lay upon wolf-fur blankets. Daenerys seated at bedside reading dispatches. Corlys checked salve once more. "Moonstone near heart." "Icy poison lingered," he murmured. "But dragon fire within your veins fought it." Aegon smiled weakly. Perhaps woman's fire at bedside proved stronger. Daenerys squeezed his hand, eyes shining. "We forge realm together," she whispered. "No blade will divide us." Lightning flickered beyond window, but thunder sounded distant. Storm retreating, for now. Aegon's gaze drifted to parchment-bearing signatures from 5 great houses. One charter, ink still drying, might yet hold realm together better than iron or flame. He closed eyes, hearing surf hammer basalt below. Dragons soar, storms rage, but tide persistent shapes even stone. Aegon felt tide of new age lap at his thoughts. Age where fire tempered by frost births steel strong enough to outlast myth. Beyond shutters, Balerion unfurled wings, stretching to moon. A low rumble shook tower. Not restlessness, but contentment. The Black Dread sensed a future worthy of guarding, forged by blood pledged and trust earned. Its foundations stronger than stone melted or ice conjured. Far north, white winds whispered promises of horrors unburned by dragon flame. Far east, merchant fleets whispered of gold buying vengeance. Somewhere, a faceless shadow rehearsed another name. But tonight, in chambers lit by one steady candle, a king healed, a queen planned, and a dragon dreamed of skies wide enough to cradle dawns not yet born. 3 months washed over the realm like a slow, relentless tide, erasing the fresh bloodstains at Harrenhal even as it carved new channels in the politics of Westeros. Spring deferred to a sullen summer, and the air grew heavy with the scent of wet iron, trampled grass, and old oaths renewed under uneasy stars. Dragonstone's basalt spires caught the dawn first. In the throne room hewn from living rock, Aegon Targaryen stood alone before the ancient volcanic glass windows, their panes veined with red crystal that set the light aflame. His wound had scarred. A faint web of white snaked from collarbone to jaw where the assassin's bolt had kissed him. Beneath his fingertips the flesh stiffened each morning, a reminder that ice could reach even a dragon's heart. He flexed, pain-sharpening purpose. Outside, Balerion's silhouette straddled the horizon. Wings stretched across a rising sun that turned the Black Dread's scars a vivid garnet. Sailors in the bay paused at their ropes, fear and reverence mingling into brisk efficiency. They hoisted black and scarlet pennants now stitched with a silver direwolf and a crowned stag, new heraldry of alliance forged under the molten shadow of Harrenhal. Aegon lifted his voice, the words splitting silence. "Send word to Winterfell. The king rides for the wall before the moon is old." Behind him, parchment rustled as a scribe bowed and fled. Another message would ride south to Storm's End, urging Argilac to marshal his fleet for escort duty, for rumor traveled faster than gulls. Volantis had convened her triarchs and whispered of dragons needing chains. North of the neck, the King's Road narrowed into a gray ribbon, pooling dusk in its ruts. Lord Cregan Stark guided his party south, 30 riders flanked by lean greyhounds that melted in and out of the wolfish mist. He had left 1,000 spears girding Winterfell's ancient walls. There were disturbances near the shivering sea, fishermen found drained of color, their eyes rimed with frost. Still, he rode south because duty demanded his presence where fire and ice must clasp hands before the longest night returned. At Moat Caelin's stump-scarred causeway, black banners awaited him, Daenerys' personal honor guard. Their captain, Ser Ryam Manderly, bowed. "The Queen bids the Lord of Winter join her at Castle Serwyn." Cregan studied the soldiers' gray cloaks, their lances tipped with moonstone edges that glittered coldly. "Net and Fong," he murmured, recalling whispers of Winterfire. He spurred on. At Serwyn, Daenerys greeted him in a mead hall newly roofed with pine. Sar candles flickered behind glass, chasing the damp from timber. She wore a surcoat of slate wool over black scale mail, silver hair bound in a simple twist. Cregan bowed. She inclined her head, dispensing with courtly frippery. "We ride to the wall," she said without preamble. "Rangers report dead things stirring beyond Eastwatch." Cregan's mouth tightened. "I have sent double patrols. Still, legends speak of dragons bearing flame to ice." Daenerys nodded. "Balerion flies by dawn, but we need northern eyes to read what dragons miss." They clasped wrists, pact renewed. On the sunset sea, a storm churned, hurling whitecaps against the Iron Isles. On Pike's wind-scoured bridge, Lord Balon Vane Greyjoy counted sails through a brass far eye. The Reach and Stormlands had dispatched only token galleys to coastal patrol, leaving shipping lanes lax. Greyjoy blood sang at the chance. Yet somewhere south, beyond sight, black sails older than any Reaver legend slid east from the Basilisk Isles, corsairs bankrolled by Volantene gold. Their holds carried great ballistae, gears oiled smooth with Leviathan fat, corals tipped with glimmering stone rumored colder than death. Their captain bore no sigil, only a tattoo of many-faced eyes across his throat. At King's Landing, Corlys Waters paced a laboratory hidden beneath the Alchemist's Guildhall. Copper retorts hissed. Emerald flames guttered under tight-mouthed alembics. He held a shard of dragonglass against a crucible of winterfire, watching frost crawl black obsidian. Behind him, Septatilla wrote notes in a ledger destined for Daenerys' private cabinet. Corlys muttered, "If frost binds glass, perhaps glass can bind frost. Shatter on fracture, diffuse into a cloud." He set the shard in a steel cage no larger than a child's fist, sealed seams with wax. A twist of heat cracked the wax. Vapor exhaled, swirling a tiny frost halo. "A breath trap," the Septa whispered. For the unseen." His eyes were haunted pools, remembering the assassin's arrow. A bell tolled above, warning, not alarm. Corlys turned. "That's the harbor bell." Tilla frowned. "Unexpected fleet?" He moved to a slit window. Up the Blackwater, 3 great dramens coasted under gray canvas.
No banners.
Silent decks. Behind them, smaller cogs and galleys kept careful distance. He cursed. "Find the hand." Daenerys' host reached the last hearth beneath twilight thick as boiled leather. Mottled skies unrolled, bleeding pale fires in the north. "Aurora," a ranger murmured, but Cregan's knuckles whitened on reins. "Not this far south." Dogs whined. In the courtyard, Queen and Stark conferred. Rangers reported another village near the lonely hills empty. Doors torn but no blood. Cellars stacked with meat untouched. Whites, a young lord spat. Or worse, Daenerys summoned her maester, who produced star charcoal sketches of old glyphs. A spiral of circles, a line of shards pointing south. Cregan traced them, recalling tales of the Night King's brand upon ice. "You will need more than fire," he told her. She nodded. "Dragonglass and steel." He called forward a cloaked figure, Mege Mormont's daughter Lyra, bearing a crate of bare-forged axes. Each axe head was Valyrian steel dulled black by a secret quenchant. Cregan lifted one. "These remain in Winterfell's vault for doomsday." He offered it to Daenerys. She hefted the weight, eyes solemn, then passed it to her sworn shield. Far overhead, Balerion circled, smoke trailing like war banners. His returning roar bounced from mountain to plain, a reminder that Daylight's king kept night's terrors at bay. In King's Landing, the Triarch flotilla anchored under false pretense of trade. Grand Maester Aladar received a letter of courtesy. "We come bearing gifts of silk and spice." The docks buzzed. Stevedores rolled barrels whose slats bore hidden runes. That night, as a gibbous moon peaked, lanterns blinked once signal. From each barrel slid a cadre of Braavosi cutthroats, faces painted alabaster, eyes rimmed coal. They scattered into alleys, seeking the Red Keep's eastern sallyport. Corlys had predicted such infiltration. His watchmen, disguised as drunken fishmongers, dogged each team. At the sally gate, a hinge squealed. A cutthroat produced a key. A voice drifted above. "Lose something?" Flames burst from the portcullis. Winterfire triggered from flasks embedded overhead. The temperature plunged. Assassins slowed, limbs numb. Then a second hiss ignited pockets of wildfire along the ground in thin rings. Trapped between freeze and flame, they perished wordless. On the parapet, Corlys lowered a torch. "Message delivered," he muttered, and ordered the harbor chain raised. By dawn, the Triarch galleys found themselves penned. The city watch's new scorpions, fitted with moonstone bolts, lined shore. Powder smoke kissed sunrise. The first Volantene ship erupted in green and blue fire, hull frozen, masts ablaze. The others struck sails and begged parley. Daenerys' column reached Castle Black in a swirl of snow despite summer's heart. The wall loomed, pale turquoise in weak sun, bigger than memory. Men upon it hailed with horns, uncertain whether to rejoice or tremble. Lord Commander Tywin Tallheart met them before the gate, black cloak raveling in wind. He knelt. "My queen, my king." He looked at Aegon dismounting from Balerion's talons. "Winter's mischief walks." He spread a parchment rubbed in charcoal. On its surface, a child's stick figures, sprawled, limbs missing. "Drawn by a wildling boy," Tywin explained. "Found south of the fist. The artist had no tongue, bitten off or stolen. He asked for chalk, traced a white walker. Tall, thin, crowned with ice horns." Aegon considered. How many rangers lost? 6 patrols in 2 moons. Cregan muttered a curse. Daenerys said, "We hunt with dragonfire and steel. The wall is not fortress enough. It must be a sword." That night Balerion soared beyond the curtain of fog, Daenerys riding behind Aegon, Cregan Stark strapped to a rear harness. They crossed fields of shattered ice where shapes crawled beneath plates of translucent frost. At the milk water they spotted a clutch of pale figures surrounding a stone cairn. Eyes like comet cores turned upward at the dragon's shadow. Mouths hissed frost clouds. Aegon urged Balerion into a shallow dive. Black flame poured, incandescent. The whites ignited, but their masters, dusky specters, lifted staves that birthed shards of night blue. Ice met flame, burst in steam. One shard sliced through the edge of Balerion's left wing, tearing a small rent that smoked. Daenerys leaned forward, whispering in High Valyrian. The dragon roared again, hotter, forcing the specter's circle to break. 2 dissolved into puddles of shattered crystal. The remaining retreated into the snowstorm, howling a note that stung ears. Balerion climbed, but Aegon felt weight. Old, potent magic opposed his own. Beneath, the cairn fell apart. Within lay a spiral of obsidian knives, black blades glimmering. Cregan's eyes widened. They craft weapons as well, Daenerys said, and they know our weaknesses. They returned to Castle Black. On the ramparts, ravens croaked. Daenerys ordered maesters to hammer obsidian arrowheads. Cregan sent swift riders to Winterfell for stores of dragonglass. Aegon drafted edicts. Every mine from Dragonstone to the Fingers must deliver half its obsidian yield northward. At Riverrun, Lord Samwell Tully hosted envoys from the free cities seeking safe passage. Over wine they confided. The Triarchy plotted regime change, but their first plan failed at King's Landing. They now turned eyes to the Iron Isles, financing Greyjoy raiders with Stormsteel scorpions. Samwell penned a letter to the Conqueror, sealing it with the trout crossing red. The Raven passed over Maidenpool the same dawn Daenerys' first Winterfire grenadiers drilled on the beach, sun glinting on frost-touched glass. On Dragonstone, Corlys met Aegon in the map room late. Wooden Westeros glowed from lanterns. The Triarchy sues for restitution, Corlys said. They offer grain and trading rights. Aegon studied the narrow sea's carved waves. And assassins? They claim no knowledge. Aegon chuckled darkly. A drowning sailor claims sea is dry. He tapped the stepstones. We need a forward garrison. A wall of ships to match our wall of ice. Corlys hesitated. Volantis still hunts dragons. They may hire pyromancers to twist W. Interfire beyond our art. Aegon raised brow. Then we learn faster. He ordered the formation of an order, Custodes Glacialis. The Frostguard knights trained to wield Winterfire traps and dragonglass axes. Cregan volunteered Northern Sons hardened by blizzard. Daenerys appointed women of the Stormlands with unbroken courage. Autumn scents bled into air. Smoke of harvested barley, musk of crushed grapes. The Red Keep bustled with stonecutters installing runes of protection above lintels. Daenerys sat the throne in Aegon's stead while he paced parapets. She issued relief charters to Dorne, requesting audience with Prince Carl Corgyle, subtle olive branch for a land too prickly to seize by dragon alone. Outwardly the realm calmed, but in chapels septons murmured of portents. A red comet glimpsed near dawn, and a tremor beneath the dragon pit that cracked tiles. At full moon, a ship from Karth arrived, crimson sails shimmering. Its cargo, for ivory chests bound with silver. Sailors claimed it was a gift for the Dragon King from the Shadowlands. Corlys oversaw inspection. First chest opened, fragrant sandalwood chips. Second, pearls black as sorrow. Third, a sheaf of scrolls inked in Valyrian glyphs too archaic to decipher. Fourth, empty save a single pale mask shaped to no face at all. Corlys felt a chill. That night he sealed the mask in a lead casket and placed it under 24 guard. Winter's first true storm rolled down from the shivering sea on the eve of remembrance, when all Westeros lit fires for the souls lost at Summerhall. Snowflakes thick as goose down tumbled above the neck. At Moat Cailin, lookouts spied blue torches flickering beyond the bogs. They rang bells. The garrison rallied, bearing dragonglass-dipped pikes lent by Winterfell. Through the dark, whites emerged, dozens, then hundreds, pale eyes burning. Off the western flank, 3 pale riders guided them, spindly as frostbitten trees. The night's cold breath reached for the south. Ravens burst upward, wings carrying dread toward King's Landing. But ravens were too slow. At dawn, Balerion rose from Dragonstone, the thunder of his wings echoing across Blackwater Bay. Aegon in full armor rode leaning into the wind, Daenerys behind him. Over the Duskendale cliffs they banked, climbing above purple cloud banks until sunrise crowned them in blood-orange radiance. Below, the King's Road wound like a gray snake. Columns of Frostguard and stark spears marched double time. At Maidenpool's marshes, they met the first refugees fleeing bogs alight with blue witchfire. Mud-soaked fisherfolk babbled of dead kinsmen walking on water. Aegon sought height. Daenerys studied ground with spyglass. White spilled like an ivory torrent from the trees, sinking into bog holes yet rising, unstoppable. Among them marched giants of shattered bone, ribs bound by ice vines. Aegon clenched reins. "Here we draw the line," he signaled Frostguard. They advanced under nets of moonstone chain, flinging breath traps that burst into spheres of cold far colder than night's breath, yet anchored by wildfire rings that ignited fleeing frost. Whites froze, then shattered under axe blows. Balerion strafed with sweeping gouts, carving lanes through undead ranks, flame turning ice to steam tornadoes. But the White Walkers remained beyond reach, staves weaving curtains of snowfall that shielded their minions. One walker lifted a shard of black ice. It hurled skyward, an impossible arc. The spear struck Balerion just above heart scales, embedding deep. The dragon roared agony. Wing beats faltered. Aegon felt the shudder, warmth fleeing. Daenerys pressed her palms to scaled hide, whispering words older than Valyria, coaxing inner fire. Balerion banked wobbly, rising higher despite wound. On the ground, Frostguard Commander Ser Willow Buckler saw opportunity. She led 6 riders through a gap Balerion had carved, galloping toward the White Walkers. Dragonglass lances lowered, winterfire flasks primed. The walkers turned, eyes like frozen eclipses. Ser Willow hurled flask. It burst, unleashing a blizzard so dense sound died. Within, her lance pierced one walker's chest. Glassy skin cracked, being melted into sleet and ash. The other 2 recoiled, retreating north behind curtain of ice fog. Whites shrieked, losing cohesion. The bog stilled, undead collapsing. Balerion landed hard. Aegon slid down, eyes frantic. The ice spear jutted deep. Blood as dark as obsidian oozed sluggish. No fire could cauterize ice lodged so. Corlys, arriving by horse, produced molten green salve of wildfire tempered to warmth. He poured over the spear, glass cracking. Cregan Stark lifted his Valyrian greatsword and, with Daenerys steadying the wound, severed the spear. The remainder melted slowly within scalding dragon blood. Night fell. They made camp among trampled reeds and burning bog gas. Aegon paced. Daenerys' cloak brushed his. "We struck a blow," she offered. "But they know dragons' weakness." Aegon's eyes like cold iron. "And we know theirs." He called command council, ordered that each Frostguard company include pyromancers carrying winterfire grenades tethered to dragonglass chains. "We answer ice with twin fangs," he declared. In the Stepstones, Argilac Baratheon's fleet clashed with corsairs of the Basilisk Sea. Stormland warships, prows carved like roaring stags, battered the lightly built pirates. Yet upon the corsairs' quarterdecks stood scorpions of curious design, arms fitted with pulleys of black glass, releasing bolts trailing shimmering frost. 2 Baratheon Dromons shuddered under their bite, decks frosting, sailors stumbling as rigging snapped. Argilac, aboard the flagship Bright Roar, saw his sails stiffen with rime. He signaled his mages. Wildfire bombs arced. Where green fire licked frost, explosions of steam bloomed, tearing masts from sockets. The Triarcha's experiment failed under heat's kiss. Argilac grinned through sleet. "Tell Volantis to forge stronger." He spat into wind. Autumn waned. Immediate victories birthed fragile confidence. Yet in the crypts beneath King's Landing, cracks split centuries-old vaults as tremors rattled. Corlys, torch raised, found murals weeping water that steamed in his light. He pried a stone loose. Beneath lay tunnels glazed with black ice, veins pulsing faint cerulean glow. "The city rests upon fault lines older than Valyria," he whispered. In the ice, he saw silhouettes, insect-thin, moving toward the keep's foundations. He reported to Daenerys, "The enemy tunnels under us. The war is not north alone." She summoned masons to reinforce with dragonglass lattice. Aegon insisted they station Balerion above Dragon Pit, breath heating tiles until the ground sweated. For 3 nights, the city smelled of wet stone. The ice retreated, but each dawn left fissures like gray spiderwebs, evidence the cold returned. Wintersgate, fort at the foot of the wall where the King's Road ends, became headquarters for Frostguard, Stark volunteers, and watchful maesters. Here Cregan crafted drills, dragonglass arrow volleys, winterfire bombs, Shield walls advanced under nets. Balerion's presence lifted morale. His roar cracked icicles from the wall's face. Yet he flew less often. The ice spear's memory lingered. In the Maester's hall, Daenerys spread scrolls from the third chest. Glyphs depicted a dragon encircled by rings. One of fire, one of ice, one of shadow. In margin runes she deciphered a warning. When fire meets ice, shadow feeds. She sought Corlys's counsel. He traced lines. Perhaps the faceless mask was not gift but omen. The many-faced god thrives on balance undone. Daenerys exhaled. So every victory begets a darker foe. She wrote to Old Town, summoning the starry September's lorekeepers. She wrote to the Citadel demanding dragon's glass shipments. She wrote to Dorne, offering seats on council in exchange for Sandsteed archers. Alliances, threads in a tapestry she prayed would not unravel under unseen blades. Deep winter arrived early. In villages north of the Blackwater, snows buried roofs before midwinter. Yet hearths burned bright. Grain stores brimming from spring's relief charters kept ovens warm. Small folk sang songs of the Dragon King and Queen riding against cold and hunger alike. In taverns, bards wove tales of the Frostguard stand in Maidenpool bogs. Children carved crude dragons from ice and set them near home fires to watch them melt. A charm that winter might melt away. But not all hearts content. In the shadow of Casterly Rock, Lady Sabetha Lannister hosted secret councils with Sellsword captains boasting anti-dragon scorpions. In the Dornish marches, Prince Corgyle weighed pride against pragmatism. And across the seas, Volantis bled coin into old Valyrian forges seeking an alloy colder than moonstone, hotter than wildfire. On a night chilled by shrieking winds, a raven struck Dragonstone's window lattice, blood icing on feathers. Aegon lifted the scrap tied to its leg. 2 words scratched in ash. Hardhome fallen. Attached a tress of pale hair. He closed fist around message, eyes narrowing. Far north, 1,000 wildlings, and perhaps their white walker masters, now held Hardhome's cliffs. A beachhead for invasion. He turned to Daenerys. We ride before night grows longer. She nodded. We arm the realm for dawn that may never come. Their hands met across map table, fingers locking. Balerion's roar shattered the calm. Flames rolled from nostrils, casting tower in blood glow. Soldiers scrambled, banners whipped into frenzied slaps. From Old Town to White Harbor, watchers saw that red flare reflect upon low clouds, a warning and a vow. Dragons would not sleep while ice walked. Before first light, bells in every keep tolled, not for death, but for mustering. Blacksmiths hammered day and night, forging dragonglass edges until sparks painted forges like ember storms. Septons blessed winterfire grenades. Stonemasons chiseled sigils together on gate lintels. Wolf, dragon, rose, stag, kraken, spearsun, all bound by a ring of flame and frost. Along the wall, horns blew thrice at noon. White walkers sighted besieging Eastwatch. Balerion soared north, his raw-wound banded in black iron, scales lacquered with alchemist resin to deflect ice spears. Behind him wheeled 3 new dragons, scarlet caraxes, bronze vagor, hatchlings of Karth treaties flown in on maester-rigged trebuchets, smaller but fierce. For the first time since Dance of Dragons, sky filled with more than a single titan. Aegon glanced back at Daenerys astride Vagor, wind shredding her cloak. Their eyes met across empty air, promise passing silent. Whatever storm breached wall or sea, they would answer as one. Below, snowfields burned under dawn's first fire, swaths of glowing embers tunneling through frost. Yet deeper shadows moved within blizzards. Shapes of ice giants, serpents chiseled from hail, and amid them, glimmering dark. A figure crowned in splintered horns of moonlit crystal, eyes twin wells of void. The night's ascendant power had sensed its antithesis abroad. Fire met ice at the roof of the world, sparks of shadow erupting where their clash struck deepest. With every wing beat, the tale of conquest reborn lengthened. Not of lands to rule, but of dawn to defend. And somewhere far beneath Dragonstone, the pale mask stirred in its leaden cage, as if tasting the fear it had begotten, waiting for the hour shadow might claim dominion over both flame and frost alike. The war for tomorrow had only just begun. The black waves of Blackwater Bay rolled under a starless, winter-choked sky as Balerion settled upon the smoking terrace of Dragonstone. His vast chest heaved steam. Each exhale rattled the basalt towers like distant thunder. Twin rents still marred the mighty wings, holes where ice spears had melted flesh and membrane alike, forcing the black dread to ground. Iron clamps bound over the wounds, but every movement pulled against them until glimmering beads of blood welled along the scale edges. Aegon dismounted, sliding down the slope of the dragon's shoulder with deliberate calm, though his heart pounded like a war drum. The smell of singed hide and cold iron filled his lungs. He rested a gloved hand upon the scarred neck. "You have borne this longer than you should," he murmured in High Valyrian. "Help comes." At the terrace's far end, the iron-bound doors boomed open. Torchbearers emerged in 2 rows, each man wearing crimson robes sewn with the 7-pointed star devoured by black flame. Between them strode a lean figure, his shaved head lacquered with scented oil, his copper-brown skin painted with glyphs in glowing coals. He carried no weapon. Instead, he clasped an iron scepter crowned by a single ruby the size of a clenched fist. His heart beat with lambent inner fire. This was Eothero, flame tongue of the Red Temple in Volantis, newly arrived under secret escort. Rumor said he had kindled funeral pyres that burned for 12 days and walked across the coals unscorched. He had answered the Queen's raven with a single phrase: "The fire has need of the dragon, and the dragon of the fire." Aegon stepped forward. "You know what you swore," he said. "No smoke and mirrors. Healing, not bondage." Eothero bowed just enough to be polite. "Balerion bears the breath of R'hllor already," he said in the common tongue, each consonant rolling with soft associate cadence. "He is furnace and forge. I seek only to stoke the embers your enemies tried to quench." Behind the priest, Daenerys watched from a parapet balcony, Frostguard at her side. Corlys Waters stood near the brazier pits, an armful of winterfire canisters ready should this ritual sour. Ravens perched upon guttering torches, black eyes reflecting ruby glow. Aegon gestured. "Begin." Eothero disrobed to the waist. Night air steamed about his skin. He knelt before Balerion's wounded wing, laying the ruby scepter across his thighs. His attendants formed a circle wider than a trebuchet turntable and began to chant. Low, rhythmic intonations in Valyrian older than old Valyria. Their voices rose and fell like waves upon volcanic shore. Eothero placed both palms upon the ragged membrane. He hissed as blistering heat licked his flesh yet did not scorch. From the ruby burst a thread of crimson light, thin as spider silk, twining around his wrists, binding priest and dragon. He began a deeper chant, voice ascending in spirals. "R'hllor, king of flame and shadow, grant your servant tongue of fire and heart of coal. Drink the chill from this wing, swallow the frost in these bones. Kindle the forge within so it burns bright as your dawn." The ruby pulsed. Balerion shuddered, a bass groan rumbling through the courtyard stones. The torches flickered crimson. Scales near the wound brightened from coal-black to cherry red, then white-hot. Molten lines traced across the wing, sealing torn cartilage. The iron clamps hissed, glowing orange before snapping like straw. The rents knitted, new membranes stretching taut as hammered hide. Eothero's chant crescendoed. He pressed his brow against the dragon's scale, sweat turning to steam. Flames erupted from the ruby, not outward but inward, flowing along invisible veins into Balerion's flesh. Each plume vanished beneath overlapping scales, kindling inner reservoirs long dulled by pain. The holes beneath the ribs expelled shards of ice spear that clattered to the stone, sizzling to vapor. Aegon's breath caught. He watched as every scar along the dragon's shoulders, wounds from nets, gashes from scorpions, frostburn from moonstone bolts, lit like forge vents, then smoothed into glossy night steel. Balerion's neck expanded, musculature swelling, sinew tightening until the creature seemed to grow a full handspan taller in the span of heartbeats. When Eothero reached the ritual's final cadence, the ruby in his hand shattered with a ringing like a broken bell. Its shards did not fall. They melted mid-air into rivulets of red gold and streamed into Balerion's throat. A roar erupted, no longer the deep baritone of a mountain but a new sound, black as a starless void and edged with crackling embers. Flames gushed from his jaws, not orange nor gold but a churning torrent of onyx shot through with blood-red veins. Where it struck the terrace flagstones, rock flashed to glass and then to ash. Attendants recoiled, robes catching fire, yet the flames touched no flesh. They bowed, prostrate. Eothero sagged, eyes rolling white. Aegon caught him before he collapsed entirely. The priest smiled through blistered lips already knitting closed. "It is done," he whispered. "Your black dread has tasted the heart of the flame god. No cold can quench him now. No mortal steel can pierce what the Lord of Light has blessed." Dawn bleached the horizon, but the courtyard around Balerion burned in perpetual dusk, red shadows swirling under the dragon's now restless wings. Daenerys approached cautiously. "Does he still heed your command?" she asked. Aegon placed one gauntlet hand upon the creature's snout. Balerion inclined his head, eyes twin furnaces swirling black within crimson. The bond thrummed through Aegon's marrow. "I feel his will clearer than before," he said. "No fear, only purpose." Eothero knelt again, voice hoarse. "He will heed fire's heralds alone. But you, Conqueror, and you, Stormborn Queen, carry fire in your veins. Guide him well." Corlys stepped forward, awe clouding his cunning eyes. "Our enemies will hear of this," he said. "Triarch and White Walker alike. They will craft new bolts, new magics." Aegon mounted with a fluid movement, bracing as the dragon crouched. "Then we will test their craft." He looked to Daenerys. "Fly with me. Let the realm see the dawn." She climbed astride Vhagar, smaller than Balerion yet fierce. As twin dragons took flight, the sky above Dragonstone blazed red and black, clouds centrifuged into spirals of smoking fire. Below, fishermen dropped nets, eyes wide with terror and wonder. Ravens fled toward the mainland bearing frantic songs. From that day forward, every telling of the war at Ice's edge changed course. When Balerion returned to the wall, the night's icy lords hurled spears of starlit crystal. The dragon shrugged them like raindrops sliding off iron. When scorpions aboard Volantine Dramans loosed bolts forged with new alloys of meteor stone and tempered shadow glass, the black dread banked through the storm, scales sparking dark red against shattering tips. At Eastwatch, he dove through a blizzard conjured by 3 White Walkers. The cold should have drained flight from his wings. Instead, the air boiled where his scales passed, snow transforming to crimson steam. He landed atop the Walker's ice platform with such weight the sea cracked around it. In the moment the undead triad raised their blades, Balerion exhaled the new breath of darkness. A tidal wave of black fire swept them into oblivion. Their swords burst like shattered moons, and every wight upon the frozen surf collapsed, inert. Troops behind the wall cheered, the sound half worship, half hysteria. Rumors spread. The dragon had become avatar of R'hllor himself, incarnate. At the stepstones, when Volantis unleashed their final terror, a chain of spellbound scorpions firing vines of liquid moonstone that hardened to crystal mid-flight, Balerion rolled beneath the barrage, allowing dozens to sting his hide. The bolts clanged uselessly, snapping to shards. He plunged, talons of darkened red steel slicing hulls in twain, firestorm obliterating the fleet's flagship, leaving molten glass floating upon the sea. Argilac sailors later swore they saw the black dread's chest glow like a forge core as he rose, the night-red flames of his breath turning water to whirling pillars of steam. In council ambers across Westeros, lords who once dreamt of rebellion shuddered. Lady Lannister ordered her scorpions dismantled. Prince Corgyle sent an envoy promising a Dornish levy for the Frostguard. Even the Citadel ceased debating the ethics of alchemy, forging dragonglass arrows instead. But all power draws shadow. One night on Dragonstone, Eothero lingered alone beside the floor-to-ceiling brazier at the foot of the throne carved from black dragonstone. He gazed through the roaring flames, pupils dilated, seeing something beyond. In the flicker he glimpsed a city of towers made of bone, a throne of ice lit by black sun, and a figure crowned not in horns of ice nor in rubies of fire but in masked nothingness. It beckoned. He bowed his head and whispered a warning to the flames. The fire flared, and across the realm candles guttered simultaneously. In the crypts beneath King's Landing, the pale mask inside its lead casket split down the center, releasing a thread of midnight that coiled like smoke then vanished into the stone. The war between flame and frost was no longer a duel. It had birthed its third element, shadow-given breath. Yet for the people of Westeros that midwinter, hope soared with every thunderous beat of the Black Dread's newly healed wings. Carters hauled grain to frost-choked villages without fear. Frostguard drilled with songs on their lips. Children etched dragons breathing black-red fire onto shields of snow. They believed, for the first time in living memory, that dawn might rise no matter how long the night. Aegon and Daenerys stood side by side on the parapets of Castle Black, looking north where a faint aurora glimmered like bruised promise. Balerion coiled upon the ice below, wings furled, glow banked yet smoldering. The queen spoke first. "We have given the realm its champion back. But the frozen ones are not vanquished. They learn from each defeat." Aegon nodded. "And so must we. Fire alone, ice alone, neither decides this war. But fire tempered by purpose, wielded by those who fear its own hunger, that may suffice." Behind them, Eothero approached, still weak yet smiling. "Remember, your majesties," he said, voice raspy. "When the Lord of Light gives a gift, he expects it born with resolve. Balerion's strength is tethered to the flame within your hearts. If doubt dims you, his fire dims with it."
Aegon met Daenerys kees.
"Then we burn bright together," she said. Balerion lifted his head, nostrils flaring. A faint black-red aurora spiraled over the wall, mirrored in the dragon's glowing scales. From the shadow-crowned forests farther north drifted a wail, ice-lamenting fire's return, or perhaps a herald of something that thrived amid their clash. Whatever the source, Balerion answered with a roar that shook hoarfrost from branches miles away, promising a reckoning beyond mortal ken. The Conqueror laid a hand upon Daenerys' shoulder. "5 kingdoms kneel," he said, "but the 6th, night itself, remains." He turned toward the glow where day should rise. "Let us bring it to heal." No torch could compete with the light in his eyes, nor any prayer with the thunder of the Black Dread preparing to rise again. Unbroken, unbound, and now invulnerable, a living brand of gods and men alike. And somewhere, deep beneath ice, a horn of black glass stirred in answer, waiting to sound the next verse in an endless song of shadow, flame, and what lies between. But that was for tomorrow. Tonight, the dragon healed, the realm drew breath, and the war for dawn burned hotter than it ever had before. The morning after the Frostguard repelled the last swarm upon the frozen neck, the dawn broke rosier than any in memory. Balerion crouched upon a glacier's crest, the sunlight dancing across his hide like a flood of liquid garnet. The wounds Eothero had sealed only a fortnight earlier now showed not even scars. Instead, new plates of iridescent scale layered seamlessly over the old, each one ridged along the edge like the teeth of a reaper's saw. The Black Dread had grown noticeably so. His tail, once merely the length of 3 mast and sail galleys placed stern to bow, now coiled across the ice shelf and knocked aside boulders the size of granaries when it twitched. Aegon Targaryen stood before the monster he called friend and thought, not for the first time, that perhaps men were not meant to ride gods. His palms tingled where they had touched those blister-hot scales only moments ago. Vhagar, the next greatest dragon alive, flew circles far out over the sea, unwilling to draw too near. Caraxes had taken to gliding on the updrafts along the wall, emitting little croons of uneasy envy. Dragons sensed power as well as any wizard, and Balerion's presence had shifted from formidable to seismic. Cregan Stark trudged across the ice, his layered furs coated in wind-blown crystals. He carried news. Another band of White Walkers had tried to circumvent the Frostguard along the shorelines near Queen's Crown. A single downward swoop from the black dread, a single blossom of that strange dark red flame, and the pack had melted to slush. But what startled the Rangers beyond the utter ease of the annihilation was that Balerion simply kept growing. Each new confrontation strengthened him. Daenerys watched from the rampart of Eastwatch, woolhood buffeting in the wind. The queen had felt her bond with Vhagar blossom until the bronze dragon answered to the merest turn of her mind. But even so, Vhagar was beginning to feel small. That Aegon shared no fear in the shadow of such magnitude filled her with mingled pride and dread. Eothero arrived at noon. He rode through a blizzard that parted around him like curtains around a hearth. His ruby staff had been reforged from 3 smaller gems, each still pulsing. When he stepped before the dragon, an audible hush fell over men and beasts alike. Even the wind quieted, as though to hear what the priest would say. He raised the staff. "Brothers of the fire," he called. His words carried on impossible clarity. "The Lord of Light has finished his forging. What once was weapon is now deliverance completed. The will of R'hllor cast large upon earth and sky. No frost may pierce him. No shadow may bind him. No mortal cunning may unmake him. Witness the culmination of flame. Behold Balerion Transcendent." As if in answer, Balerion exhaled a single breath through his nostrils. The red-black vapor rolled into the sky, where it caught the pale sun and stained it blood orange. Snow around his talons turned instantly to hissing vapor, releasing curling plumes that resembled fleeing spirits. Aegon stepped beside the priest. "And what price was paid?" he asked, quiet enough only Eothero could hear. "Faith," said the Volantene. His voice trembling either from joy or from the cold he now felt for the first time. Faith and the careful surrender of doubt. Such is always the coin. Aegon refused to ponder deeper, not yet. For far to the north, an enormous spike of obsidian black as starless midnight, fabled frozen spear of the north, had appeared overnight upon the horizon, thrusting up through glaciers like a dagger piercing the sky. The Night King had long been rumored to dwell in caverns, in drifting citadels of frost. Now he had thrown a gauntlet shaped from a mountain. The march to that spear was like falling through seasons in reverse. Every league closer to the black icicle, as maesters began calling it, shed a thinner layer of daylight. First the sky lost its northern turquoise and became gray. Then the gray thickened into a bruised violet at midday. By the time they camped at the banks of the shivering gulf, noon's meager light resembled twilight, and the stars that should have hidden appeared as cold pinpricks glinting angrily through the dim gloom. Yet with every mile conquered, Balerion swelled. It was not only the men who spoke of it. Dragons themselves squawked in confusion as they witnessed it. Caraxes banked so close to Vhagar one morning that their wing beats tangled. Where once Caraxes had been a nimble terror greater than most keeps, he now resembled a sparrow darting around a market bell when measured against the widening shadow of the black dread. Aegon was first to notice that the growth seemed tied to battle. After their camp repelled a midnight assault of whites, so many that the bodies clogged the river ice and formed a dam, the big dragon's shoulders had thickened again. Plates of scale slid over one another until they seemed a living fortress wall. By the 4th week, Balerion's chest stood as tall as the wall itself, and even the King's Road cracked beneath his tread. He could no longer coil upon ice floes or hillsides. Wherever he rested, he sculpted the land into new terrain. Maester Branton tried to weigh this miracle against lore. He scoured the dusty pages of dragon lore. A study in mutable dimensions by Asia Pyrwynen, which spoke of dragons that grew so great they eclipsed castles, but even that text, hinging on rumor, paled before this reality. The maester approached Eothero with theories that R'hllor's gift was forging Balerion a new body for every enemy he consumed. The priest only smiled, offering no secrets but a phrase. "The fire that is dear to us burns dearer still within his chosen." The first full engagement occurred upon a plain of blue-white ice 2 days' march from the Spear Mountain. Scouts spied an army of wights so vast that their shuffling forms appeared like dunes rolling across a frozen sea. At their center rode a dozen white walkers, each mounted upon steeds of brittle ice that exhaled clouds of rime. Their king did not appear. Instead, They bore spears shaped from the same strange, void-dark crystal that had once pierced Balerion's wing. Daenerys, astride Vhagar, scanned the ranks before the battle. The Frostguard formed 3 concentric rings anchored by Stark pikemen and Dornish bowmen. Catapults, fitted with chains of moonstone and casks of winterfire, stood ready. Argilac Baratheon's knights, glinting silver under frost, manned the flanks. Even hardened veterans swallowed when they saw the size of the dragon overhead, a creature now so large that his descent battered the wind into concentric shockwaves. Aegon guided Balerion low. When the first volley flew from the White Walkers, dark spears whistling, the Black Dread did not bank away. Scores of spears struck, cracking like thunder, but they bounced back, shattered into dust. Balerion's scales glowed furious crimson where the impact fell. He answered with a roar louder than avalanche. Black-red fire poured in horizontal arcs, cutting a trench half a league long in the enemy front. Every white within melted, not just to slush but to puddles of gray ash. The White Walkers retaliated with frost winds so frigid that banners 50 paces from the front line froze stiff and shattered into fluttering shards. The gust should have cooled flame, but the fire burned darker. Balerion lunged, jaws snapping one walker and horse in half. The fragments exploded into shattered blue glass. Another walker hurled its spear point blank into the dragon's eye. The weapon struck, indented scale beneath the lid, then sputtered to nothing, smoking as though dunked in forge oil. The eye shone back, unharmed, glowing inner ember. Balerion crushed that walker under a claw broader than a tavern floor. On the ground, Frostguard wilding slingers deployed spheres of frozen wildfire across the churned ice. The spheres burst into swirling vortexes of black-red vapors that clung to enemies but left allies untouched. Knights cried when they saw whites freeze, then ignite from within, collapsing without a single blow. It became a rout so complete that within the hour no enemy remained to surrender. The plain, which had resembled polished glass, now smoked like kiln slag. At its center, Balerion reared and bellowed, his wings in full unfurl spanning the visible horizon. Vhagar and Caraxes flapped in timid orbit around his ankles. After that battle, the dragon grew again. The black icicle revealed itself not merely a spire but a palace. A hollow, cathedral-scaled dagger of obsidian, glassy black flecked with haunted blue veins. Light slid into it and did not return. The closer one approached, the more stars seemed to bend above its apex despite the daylight. Snow spiraled around it in unnatural eddies, forming faces that wept crystal tears before fading back into the storm. The army halted half a league away, camping in concentric barricades of ash-fused ice. A war council met beneath a pavilion so warmed by Balerion's radiant presence that the ground melted into steaming mud. Aegon sat upon a stool hammered from Vhagar's shed claws, Daenerys at his side, Eothero flanking him, Cregan and Argilac standing at attention. Corlys traced lines upon a frost-rimmed map. "No visible gates," Corlys said. "No ramparts either. The walkers depart from caverns below, not breaches." He indicated tunnels drawn, descending into nothingness. "Most likely it anchors an ancient cave network." "And the King of Ice?" Cregan asked. A hush followed. Eothero closed his eyes. "He dwells beneath, in a chamber of frozen stars. There he tends a wound that cannot heal, an arrow of flame lodged in his heart since creation. He hungers to kill the sun itself." Argilac grunted. "Then let sun fall upon him. Balerion's fire will melt that castle like wax." Eothero shook his shaven head. "Not enough. The spear palace eats flame. Strike haphazardly and its heart will drink the heat, feeding shadow." Aegon spoke, voice iron. "Then we carve a path. Vhagar and Caraxes burn the exterior, draw out defenders. Frostguard storms the breach with winterfire nets. Balerion and I descend for the king." Daenerys fixed him with those violet eyes. "We ride together, no dragon alone." Arguments died on his lips. He inclined head. The assault began beneath a sky ripped open by auroras the color of deep bruises. Vhagar loosed golden bronze fire that flowed down the spire's slopes like incense over a funeral brazier. Caraxes darted between outcroppings, lancing corridors with sizzling tongues. The Black Palace screamed. It screamed. Everyone heard it, like a choir of horns blown within a tomb. The ice plain shook. Fissures erupted, releasing columns of frosty steam. Out of those cracks rose the great dead. Giants clad in shattered plate, mammoths draped in ice, serpents of snow coiling in silent fury. Balerion collided with that tide head-on. A single wing beat smashed a mammoth to powder. The black-red fire ignited giants' bones like dry grass. Every blow he suffered, he appeared to drink, swelling further. Witnesses swore they saw his chest broaden mid-battle, ribs expanding. Each roared deeper and darker. But the palace did feed on flame, as Eothero warned. Where Vhagar's and Carax's fire struck, cracks glowed blue then closed, the palace's obsidian veins brightening. A swirling funnel of shadow climbed its flanks, coalescing at the tip into something winged, vague shape of a dragon wrought of night and void. Eothero pointed, eyes wide. "Shadow of the first flame," he cried. "That mask we caged. It has found body." Before Daenerys could bank Vhagar, the shadow dragon swooped, wings beating silence instead of wind. Its breath asterisk, if it could be called breath, was a wave of absolute darkness that extinguished torches a mile distant. The queen reeled. Vhagar shrieked as frost traced her wings. Balerion hurled himself upward, intercepting. The real dragon dwarfed the shadow. Still the dark creature struck without fear. They grappled amid torn storm clouds. Spectators below saw the sky rip in half. One side flickered crimson shot through by black core, the other collapsed into pure absence of light. The shadow dragon drove claws of negativity into Balerion's hide, only to have them snap, dissolving like smoke. The black dread's incandescent scales glowed hot enough to distort air. With one colossal bite, he seized the shadow's throat. Fire of deepest red poured from Balerion's jaws into the creature. Darkness drank it, swelled, and then imploded, unable to contain reality. The explosion was silent, a collapsing of color. North sky went pitch black for 3 breaths before roaring back in an auroral shockwave that flung white walkers from the spire's flanks like toys. Yet the explosion also cracked the palace, carving a web of glowing fissures down its face. A period of hush followed, as though the earth itself waited. Aegon rode Balerion down upon a balcony formed of jutting obsidian. Daenerys and Vhagar followed, Caraxes perching to guard. Frostguard archers rained dragonglass bolts into the courtyard below, while Stark spearmen formed phalanxes around steaming entrances. Within the balcony archway opened a hall lined by crystal stalactites dripping rime. A chill so complete it tasted of iron filled every lungful of breath. At its terminus stood the Night King. He was taller than memory's whispers, crowned in a corona of broken ice horns, armor translucent as new frost over a pond. In his right hand he clenched a sword of void-black crystalline fire that cast no heat, only hunger. In his left, he carried half a mask of blank white bone, the broken relic that had once been sealed in King's Landing. Aegon dismounted, black fire in hand. Daenerys advanced at his side, bearing the Winterbane axe Cregan had gifted. The Night King regarded them with eyes like midnight stars. Chosen of flame, he spoke, not aloud, but within every head. "You grow in arrogance." Aegon planted blade tip upon stone, sparks bursting from the contact. "It is no arrogance to protect dawn. It is hubris," the king replied. "Flame burns bright, then dies. Ice endures. Shadow consumes both." Daenerys hefted her axe. "We deny you the world." She sprinted, swinging in broad, glittering arc. The king parried with void blade, frost bursting from contact. Ice crawled along the head of the axe but melted before racing down haft, burned away by unseen heat from her gauntlets. Gauntlets forged of Balerion's cast scales. Aegon thrust Blackfire, the Valyrian steel singing. Where his sword met void blade, sparks of white and red danced. The Night King's strength was titanic, yet it met something greater. Every time he tried to force Aegon back, heat flowed from Balerion outside, through bond, into Aegon's muscles. Black fire began to glow a dull, ominous crimson. Ice exploded from the king's fist, forming spears mid-air. Some struck Aegon's breastplate. They shattered. Others slashed Daenerys' arm. The wound hissed, instantly sealed by the gauntlet's warmth. The Night King backstepped onto a dais of frozen bone. Crystal pillars formed behind him. He pressed the half-mask to his face. Shadow flared, spawning echoes behind Aegon. Faceless silhouettes wielding nothing but cold. Eothero arrived then, stumbling forward, ruby staff raised. The abomination tried to engulf him, but Balerion's roar outside shook the hall. The priest thrust the rubies into the ice floor. "By the Lord of Light," he whispered, "I claim this shadow." Flames shot from the gems, not outward but upward, weaving a net of glowing filaments that bound the silhouettes and dragged them back toward the mask. The Night King shrieked, first true sound he'd made. Aegon seized opening. He leapt, driving Blackfire into the ice sword. The void blade snapped. He pulled back. Daenerys hurled the Winterbane axe, striking the king's chest. In that moment, Balerion's fire erupted through the hole in the ceiling, black-red columns surging down, bathing everyone in a furnace wind. It struck Aegon, Daenerys, even Eothero, but they felt only warmth. The Night King, masked and wounded, began to freeze. Flame met Fr.
Ost, shadows hissed.
The palace's veins flashed molten red, then white. A thunderous crack split stone. The Night King staggered, limbs encased in glowing amber ice. He gazed into Aegon's eyes. "Endless winter cannot die." "Then let it melt," Aegon said, and thrust Blackfire through the mask, through the frozen skull beneath, pinning it to the obsidian dais. Silence. The palace groaned. Frost receded from pillars. Outside, whites collapsed by the tens of thousands, like puppets with severed strings. Aegon withdrew the sword. The king's body crumbled into glittering snow that drifted away, leaving only the half-mask, now cracked into dust. The climb from the collapsing palace was chaos of falling glaciers and venting steam. But Balerion, larger than any natural corridor, simply tore his own path, claws cleaving stone, wings beating to loft his riders free from the crumbling spire. They burst into the storm-racked sky as the black icicle fractured, every shard glowing volcanic red where flame had touched it. There was no colossal explosion. Instead, the fortress imploded in on itself, leaving a crater from which hot vapor curled. In the rising dawn, aurora hues softened into pink. The eternal winter sky lightened as if a weight slid from its shoulders. Snow began to fall, soft, ordinary snow, untainted by blue fire or necrotic ash. Balerion landed upon a new-formed plateau, Vhagar and Caraxes flanking. Every soldier, Stark, Baratheon, Dornish, free folk, approached in stunned reverence. None cheered. They simply sank to knees. Eothero knelt too. "The Lord of Light has wrought his will," he intoned. "Flame burns bright, frost is broken, shadow dispelled." But Aegon understood victory's true nature. He placed a hand upon Balerion's massive foreclaw. The dragon watched with eyes that held galaxies of embers. He was now something beyond the ancient image of the Black Dread. He was a living cataclysm, a deity of ash and dawnlight in equal measure. "Invulnerable," the priest whispered, "and complete."
Daenerys met Aegon's case.
"Now we forge peace as mighty as war," she said. Aegon nodded, though doubts stirred. Power so absolute would tempt men and gods alike. But for this breath, under this dawn, the world warmed. The Frostguard raised a new banner atop the last shard of the palace. Three-headed dragon red on black, encircled by a direwolf silver, a crowned stag gold, a red sun spear, a roaring kraken, and a golden rose, all set against a halo of twilight fire. Southward, the auroras faded. Ice retreated from rivers, revealing water free of rime. Fields that had lain fallow under sudden winter sighed with possibility. Yet somewhere in the depths of the world, A coil of shadow drifted, unanchored, whispering of new shapes to carve, new hosts to claim. But those whispers would have to cross flame and fong and the will of two monarchs bound in equal parts love and duty. And perched above them all, grander than myth ever dared, Balerion. Twice the size he had been, impervious and aglow with an inner furnace, spread wings wide enough to eclipse the horizon. He roared not in threat, but in proclamation that dawn had survived another night. Months later, sailors rounding Cape Kraken would glimpse a silhouette bigger than a storm front soaring beyond clouds, and children in the Reach would claim they saw a midnight sun circling under daylight. Scholars argued whether the new age belonged to men or dragons, and priests whispered of a fire god's ultimate champion on earth. Yet small folk planting spring barley simply thanked any name that kept the frost from their sprouts. And so the saga of fire and ice did not end but entered its next verse. A realm breathing with new hope, shielded by a dragon every enemy called truly invulnerable, and by the hearts of those who vowed that such power would serve life, not devour it. For the moment, dawn's light endured, and its keeper was the Black Dread Reborn, twice forged in flame and fate, looming stupendous above the edges of map and legend alike. Wind scoured the crater where the black icicle had fallen, hissing through sulfur-scented steam vents and rolling harmlessly across Balerion's colossal frame. The Black Dread sprawled like a living mountain at the basin's rim, wings folded, scales pulsing with a furnace glow that lit fissures orange against the winter twilight. Men moved in ant-like columns beneath him, carting white ash for disposal, dismantling broken siege gear, pitching watchfires that flickered like votive candles beside a god. Aegon Targaryen strode from tent to tent issuing orders. Riverlander engineers would divert meltwater toward the shivering gulf. Dornish bowyers would fletch the last of the dragonglass shafts. Stark rangers would hunt fresh game for the Frostguard whose provisions ran thin. But every few steps he glanced at Balerion, measuring. The dragon had not grown since dawn, yet the memory of unending size failed to ease his wariness. Power without boundary unsettled every instinct he possessed. Near the shallow end of the crater stood Eothero, priest of the Red Temple, flanked by his acolytes. They had erected a broad iron tripod over a pit of glowing coals. From its apex hung a crystal urn filled with ruby dust that shivered in the heat. Around the pit they traced a ninefold ring of crushed onyx and powdered moonstone. Their chant was low, rhythmic, turning vowels to molten glass. When Aegon approached, steam curled from his cuirass. The air around the ritual ring was blister-hot. Eothero opened his eyes. They burned like coals half-banked. "The final word begins," he said. "You wished certainty that your dragon would grow no further." Aegon's voice remained steady. "He is mighty enough. Any larger, and the realm he defends would break beneath his own tread. The Lord of Light has no interest in ruin for ruin's sake," Eothero replied. "But fire grows by nature until fuel runs thin. To still that hunger we must set a seal. A boundary Lawler accepts." He gestured, and two acolytes heaved an iron cage from the coals. Inside glowed fragments of the ruby staff which had shattered during Balerion's first transformation. They had fused together in the embers, forging a misshapen gem that throbbed faint red-black light. This heartstone bore the initial command, "Rise." Eothero's smoky tenor carried across the basin. "Tonight it will bear the second. Be enough. We require witness and assent from dragon and rider alike. Blood, flame, and word." Aegon nodded once. "Proceed." The priest turned to his followers. "Prepare the invocation of the bridal." One acolyte produced a bowl carved from obsidian veined with tin. Another unrolled a parchment of untreated lambskin, blank save for two empty circles at its center. A third drew a slender knife of Valyrian steel, etched with symbols for binding. Aegon removed his gauntlet and sliced his palm. Dark red drops hissed as they struck the bowl. Eothero dipped a two-fingered swab into the blood, then painted a sigil across the lambskin's first circle, a dragon's eye enclosed by a flaming Ouroboros. He passed the knife to Daenerys, who had arrived astride Vhagar, cloak snapping in the updraft. She bared her forearm without hesitation, Scarlet flowed into the bowl. Eothero traced the second circle, a crown of dawn rays behind the three-headed dragon. The priest melded the two circles with a single stroke, pronouncing words that tasted of cinders and salt. The parchment flared. When the flash died, the circles had fused into one azure-rimmed ring that hovered above the page like a moat of solid smoke. "Now the third blood," Eothero intoned, and all present turned to Balerion. Aegon approached the dragon's jaw. "Old friend," he murmured in High Valyrian. A final request of strength. He pressed his wounded palm against the scale just below the left nostril. For one breath nothing happened. Then a droplet the size of a small melon oozed from the scale's join. Liquid fire more than blood, glowing black-red. It dripped, searing a narrow trench in the basalt before cooling into a crimson stone no larger than a thumb joint. Eothero collected it with iron tongs, placed it atop the fused ruby in the cage. His chant rose to a keening hymn. Flame jets writhed up the tripod legs. Sparks danced across the crushed onyx until the ninefold ring blazed like a solar corona. The ruby heartstone cracked, welcoming the dragonblood gem into its core. A pulse thundered through the crater. Snow on distant ridges avalanched in powdery sheets. Balerion stirred. Every soldier froze, fearing another growth spurt. But his wings folded tighter, muscles relaxing rather than swelling. The smolder beneath his scales dimmed from furnace white to steady ember, as though the flames inside shifted to slow, measured inhale. Eothero thrust his hands into the cage. Flesh should have vaporized. Instead his palm smoked but did not char. He withdrew the fused gem, now perfectly spherical. "Witness!" he cried. "The fire bound." He offered it to Aegon. The Conqueror accepted. Heat licked up his arm but brought no pain. Only an immense stillness, heavy as destiny. He raised the sphere so it caught the weak starlight. "By my blood," he declared, "and by the pact sealed tonight, let Balerion's might remain at this measure, neither waning nor waxing, until my line or the world itself is ash." Daenerys placed her gauntlet hand over his. "And by my breath," she said, "let that power serve life, not hunger." Eothero knelt, voice breaking. "So ratified. Flame obeys." The gem blinked once, then cooled to dull ruby. Its inner light faded to a heartbeat flicker and stilled. Across the crater, Balerion exhaled. His breath no longer rattled the basalt towers. It hissed low, controlled, the sound of a bellows set after forge fires banked for the night. Aegon felt their bond settle. No surge of size, no shiver of latent growth. Strength remained ocean deep, but its surface at last lay smooth. He turned to the assembled ranks. "The Black Dread stands complete. Not the destroyer of worlds, but the shield over kingdoms. Spread word to every holdfast from Dorne to the Wall. Dragon's fire is fixed, not in greed but in guardianship." Cregan Stark lifted Winterbane high in salute. Argilac Baratheon drove his stag standard into the steaming earth like a lance. The Frostguard slammed spearbutts, the clang echoing across thawing slopes. Even Vagor trumpeted approval, half murmur, half roar. Night deepened. Auroras retreated beyond the northern horizon, leaving sky clear for the first time since the war began. Stars glittered above a landscape scarred but breathing. On Dragonstone, scribes would set this date to parchment as the night of the fire bridal. Balladeers would shorten it to the binding. And in decades to come, children would recite that a fiery priest, crimson-robed and fearless, had tempered the Black Dread with words of ashen grace, ensuring the world would forever hold exactly one Balerion, vast enough to humble time, yet not so vast as to swallow it. Beneath the silent constellations, Aegon wrapped an arm around Daenerys' shoulders. Together they watched Balerion stretch upon the caldera rim, settling into a sleep that shook no mountain, toppled no wall. A sleep content with its own enormity. And somewhere deep within the dragon's slow thunder heart, a cinder-like ember flickered, steady, measured, eternal, marking the final limit of his growth and the beginning of an age when might, at last, was mastered by will. A cold hush settled across the steaming basin long after the red-black gem cooled in Aegon's palm. Clouds dispersed, unveiling an unfamiliar sky. No bruised auroras, no streaking comets, only a field of winter stars glimmering with clean silver light. Yet below, the land lay raw, an open wound of glassed ice, shattered stone, and smoldering snow where the black icicle had stood. Fires crackled in shattered crevices, casting fugitive shadows that fled the newborn dawn. Balerion, immortal and at last immutable, eased his vast body into repose at the northern lip of the crater. Frost steamed off flanks that now resembled obsidian bastions veined with ember. Breaths came slow and measured, great piston sighs that stirred banners 100 paces distant. When his eyelids slid shut, twin furnaces dimming to coals, every heart in the basin accepted this signal as final. The war of winter's night was done, if not all wars. But peace does not sprout full-grown from ash. It must be coaxed, defended, tested. And so the days after the binding became an awkward dance of nerves, jubilation, and looming questions. Aegon and Daenerys spent the first sunrise atop the wall's oldest tower, overlooking a world half-thawed. To the south spread a wilderness of skeletal forests shedding ice like old bark. To the north, a shivering waste whose white plains no longer crawled with undead. Frostguard sentinels patrolled catwalks in silent wonder. Ravens lined parapets, heads cocked, as if weighing the silence left by the Night King's demise. The Queen's breath clouded in front of her lips. "We must set new watches," she said at length. "The realm will think the danger over." But something always fills a vacuum. Aegon brushed black hair from his brow, eyes on Balerion's distant silhouette. "Marrow of the realm is brittle," he agreed. "One fracture invites another. We will keep the Frostguard north a season longer, and the Night's Watch shall be reforged, no longer penance for thieves, but an order of honor." She smiled. "A new oath? I should like to write it with you." They clasped hands on frozen stone that began to thaw beneath their palms. At Castle Black's yard, smiths labored round the clock. Broken dragonglass spears were reforged into plaques. Frost-dented helms became commemorative goblets passed among survivors. Grim jokes circulated, wooden cups carved like walker skulls, dice etched with iron flakes from the black icicle. In the forge's smokestack, a single icicle hung stubbornly, refusing to drip. Old Cowan the armorer swore that until it melted he would not quench his hammer. The icicle endured 7 days, then cracked under a clear noon sun. Cowan ceased pounding, satisfied that winter itself had set down its tools. Cregan Stark returned to Winterfell ahead of his banners, racing spring's first thaw. He crossed white fields where crocuses poked through melting drifts like scattered purple jewels. At the Godswood, he knelt beneath the weirwood and thanked nameless spirits. He offered strip of Ice Walker armor, now brittle as sugar, to be hung on a branch and watched the faces in the red bark swallow its chill. Then he strode to the great hall and declared before vassals that the king in the north owed fealty not out of fear but gratitude. "Let the realm be one keep," he said, "roofed by dragon wings, buttressed by wolf suns." None dissented. Across the hall, Lady Lyra Mormont punched her brother's shoulder in raw delight. House Mormont would escort dragonglass shipments south, turning old mining tunnels beneath Bear Island into vaults guarded by bears and Frostguard alike. Argilac Baratheon sailed home triumphant yet uneasy. Half his fleet lay at the bottom of the narrow sea, wreckage strewn in watery graves. But the sailors who survived spoke in whispers of a new terror. During the last chase of the Volantene corsairs, they saw a shape under dark waves. An immense shadowy kraken rhymed in frost. When Argilac asked how a creature of the deep could exhale rhyme, none answered. He tightened cloak, scanning stormy horizons. The sea, he decided, was nursing grudges of its own. He would bolster Storm's End seawalls and petition Aegon for Scorpion Ballistae modified for salt spray. In King's Landing, Corlys Waters presented the fire bridal gem to the small folk during a solemn procession. Thousands thronged the streets to glimpse the ruby-dark orb cradled in a glass reliquary. Some cheered, others fell to their knees. A baker's boy tossed petals, shouting, "Dragon is king and god." A septon frowned but dared not scold. He instead sprinkled holy water that sizzled where it touched the reliquary's hot surface. Within the Red Keep, Grand Maester Aladar wrote feverishly, binding parchments to compile the definitive chronicle of the Winter War. Every page smelled of goose quill and singed dust. The old man paused often, rubbing stiff fingers that trembled at recollection of the Night King's silent scream. A single raven arrived from Old Town, bearing a letter sealed by the starry September. The High Septon congratulated their majesties on victory but questioned the theological ramification of an invincible dragon blessed by a foreign deity. Aegon read the scroll, handed it to Daenerys, and said with dry smile, "We shall host him for dinner. Let him behold the dragon's might tempered by gentle hands." She raised an eyebrow, remembering Septitilla's quip that no argument survives one glimpse of 10-story-tall scales. Eothero remained at Dragonstone, meditating inside the volcano's half-dormant throat. He sat cross-legged on a basalt shelf beside rivers of slow-oozing magma, feeding scarlet resin into small bowls. From that heat he divined omens. A spiral of smoke that turned upon itself, a flute note whistle where none should be, a tiny ember drifting upward and refusing to extinguish even in the ash-laden air. When an acolyte asked whether he foresaw new dangers, Eothero opened eyes bright as forged steel. "Always," he said, "but now the flame is anchored. It may illuminate rather than devour." South of Ironwood, the Prince of Dorne, Carl Corgyle, oversaw orphaned sand steed foals galloping across hot dunes. These were horses bred for messenger speed, perfect to knit a realm's farthest points together. He drafted a letter offering 20 sand steeds for royal courier service, in exchange for the old Dornish wish, local governance without dragon garrisons. The letter reached King's Landing within a fortnight. Daenerys replied that dragons would not lord over Dorne so long as galleons flying the Sunspear sailed north with citrus fruit, figs, and sailors ready to defend the narrow sea. Weeks bled into months. Several events stood out. On the new moon of the Embertide, a white caravan of Braavosi debt collectors arrived, demanding reparations for destroyed Triarch warships. Aegon met them on Dragonstone's harbor. Balerion, looming behind, snorted a smoke ring that melted half their silken flags. The Braavosi spokesman recalculated losses, settled for token coin, and apologized for the smoke. They departed swiftly. A merchant ship from Karth delivered caskets of scented sandalwood to the Red Keep. Corlys inspected them, found hidden false bottoms, and seized luxury crossbow bolts tipped in a silver-blue alloy colder than moonstone. He dismantled them, discovering etched runes praising the silent sea. He took them to Eothero, who read them with pursed lips. "Shadow stirs," the priest murmured, "but has lost its anchor. Now it searches for cracks." A traveling sept band performed a new play, The Rise of the Night's Dawn, dramatizing Balerion's victory with outrageous inaccuracies. Balerion soared to the stars, snatched the moon, and hurled it at the Night King. Small folk adored it. Aegon laughed when he heard the tale. Let them have spectacle. Truth would frighten them. Daenerys added, "Better children dream at night than wake screaming." A slender woman in plain garb attempted to slip into the dragon pit with a flask of green fluid. Soldiers stopped her. She tried to bite her own tongue. They seized her and found tattooed eyes on her throat. Faceless training, the captain concluded. Edition interrogation gleaned little. She claimed to hunt the false god for a high bidder. She vanished in her cell the next dawn. Bars intact, door untouched. Shadows cast by the torches formed a mask on the wall and drifted away before watchers could react. By midsummer, the north bloomed with purple lupin, white crocus, and green fern. Blackberries swelled along roadsides. Farmers plowed soil no longer iron-hard. Flocks migrated in patterns unseen for generations. The small folk called it the Dragon Spring. Yet among high seats, politics returned like thawing mud. King's Landing hosted the conclave of 7 banners to ratify the Dragon Charter, a constitution for united governance. Lords and ladies filled the Red Keep's throne room, which still glittered from recent restorations. Quartz chandeliers, fresh polished marble, and iron sconces shaped like stylized dragons breathing candlelight. At the dais, the Iron Throne stood empty. Instead, Aegon and Daenerys sat upon twin chairs of dark weirwood overlaid with scaled bronze, symbols of balance between fire and realm. Balerion could not attend. He circled high above the city, a shadow across sunlit spires. Cregan Stark spoke first, voice like rolling stones. The North swears to the Charter, provided Night's Watch remains autonomous and funded by Crown Tithe. The Assembly murmured assent. Prime Armither Tyrell addressed next. The Reach seeks reassurance that dragons shall not scorch our vineyards even by accident. Daenerys replied, Balerion will reside mainly at Dragonstone. When he flies the mainland, his course shall be heralded by courier ravens. No vine will wither under his shade. Tyrell bowed. Argilac Baratheon hammered the floor once. Storm's End demands naval fortifications against frost kraken rumored in the deep. Aegon promised shipwrights, stormcasters, and dragonglass-dipped ballistae for every galleon. Lady Sabetha Lannister stood last. She slid a document across a sapphire slab. The Westerlands agree, on condition that the crown compensates for mines collapsed by Walker Frost. Aegon raised a brow. Dragons had never touched Lannister mines. He saw Daenerys' subtle nod, diplomacy over confrontation. He granted funds equal to 1 year's tax in gold. Lannister lips curved in satisfied coil. The High Septon stepped forward, his alabaster robes embroidered with pale sunbursts. Holy worship cannot ignore the flame god's intrusion, he intoned. We require that R'hllorès rites honor the Seven's dominion. Yathero, present in modest garb, inclined head. The Lord of Light claims sun and shadow, yet yields temples of stone to those who dwell within them. The High Septon, uncertain whether this was concession or riddle, offered a thin smile. The charter signed, raven ink still glistening, was sealed by the fire bridal gem pressed onto molten wax at each corner. When the gem lifted, the wax cooled in fractal patterns that resembled dragon scale interwoven with direwolf fur, and at the center, a ring of tiny 7-pointed stars. No craftsman had shaped it. Heat alone birthed the fusion. The assembled gasped, omen of concord, or warning that hot wax binds disparate forms only for a time. Night fell after revels. Minstrels plucked lutes, perfuming the air with drunken laughter. Moonlight painted the dragon pit in pensive glow. Aegon strolled its perimeter alone, cloak brushing stone. He paused before the cavernous arch where Balerion once slept generations ago. A wound in the city's skeleton, long since roofless. Inside grew scrub trees, their branches tapping against blackened pillars. A gentle cough. Eothero stepped from shadow. Majesty, he said, voice distant. We sealed his growth. Yet flame seeks expression beyond flesh. Aegon frowned. Speak plainly. Balerion's power will externalize, the priest explained. It will inhabit signs. Cracked marble, heated spring, perhaps newborn dragon eggs awakened in old vaults. The fire wanders until settled. Aegon absorbed this. Then we channel its wanderings, convert magma vents to forges, heat seeds for greenhouses. Let power refine, not devour. Eothero's eyes sparkled. You think as a smith. Good. But a smith who quenches poorly cracks the blade. Tread wisely. They parted under starlight, each weighed by visions of forging an empire from dragon breath. Autumn approached. On Dragonstone's eastern cliffs, Daenerys oversaw hatching pits where 3 eggs, thought stillborn since the doom, now pulsed with faint warmth. Pyromancers harnessed Balerion's distant radiance via copper mirrors. She hummed lullabies taught by her mother. Valid Zavorsa vows, hatch, little storm. Each egg rocked gently. She whispered, when you wake, the world must be kind. One shell cracked the next dawn, revealing a serpent no larger than a lapdog, scales dull red. Its first sneeze sent sparks into twilight. It promptly curled beneath her cloak. She named it Emberwing. Elsewhere, Caraxes' rider, Lord Tylan's Sunbreak, a minor noble with wild laughter, founded an order of dragon heralds. These couriers rode wyverns bred from Lycene stock. They swore to deliver messages across Westeros in half the time of ravens, wearing crimson sashes. Their horns became the realm's new pulse, deep brassy calls preceding urgent news. But not all tidings were bright. In the stepstones, fishermen found shards of black glass drifting ashore, etched with swirling glyphs. One brought a shard to a maester in Sunspear. Within days, he died of frostbite, though the desert air blazed 40 degrees. The shard melted to shadow water and vanished. Word reached Corlys waters. He dispatched a covert sloop to scour every isle for similar relics, instructing sailors to use tongs and dump any find into molten salt. Off the coast of Pike, raiders glimpsed ghost-white leviathan tentacles breaching moonlit waves. They swore the water froze wherever the limbs brushed. Lord Balon Vane Greyjoy offered a bounty for proof, but none returned. Rumor seeded sleepless nights in seaside villages. In Volantis, Triarch archmages convened and, enraged by economic losses, pledged to raise a glass leviathan fueled by shadow. They captured a small sea dragon, bled it dry, and infused its heart with winterfire stolen through spies. The experiment consumed its creators, leaving only molten marble and statues fused to floor, eyeless and silent. Yet the Triarchs did not cease. Ambition rarely melts. The many-faced god's temple in Bravos remained silent. But unclaimed coins continued to appear on altar steps. Platinum, jade, flint shards, each bearing a sigil of a cracking mask. The kindly ones whispered of a contract still unpaid and thus still active. Winter returned timidly that year, sending snow sprinkles rather than storms. People called it the Dragon's Mercy. Harvests boomed. Breweries rolled casks of black dread stout. Its foam dyed crimson. Children carved ice statues of Balerion for name-day games. Parents sprinkled cinder dust so shadows looked real. A traveling maester recorded, "We have entered a Pax Draconicus." Yet in the quiet corners, watchers knew peace breeds complacency. Frostguard remained on rotation. Scorpions stood loaded at every port. Priests of R'hllor kept vigil before the fire-bridal gem, which sometimes flickered at twilight as if measuring unseen trespass. Atop Dragonstone one dusk, Aegon joined Daenerys by the volcanic vent. Emberwing, now cat-sized, curled on her lap, cooing. In the distance, Balerion's silhouette fringed the horizon. Immense, still, sentinel. Daenerys stroked the hatchling. "We caged his growth, but not ours," she mused. Aegon watched a lone gull ride thermal updrafts. "The realm will grow or shrink by how we guide it. No gem can fix that. Nor priest, nor dragon." He took her hand palm to palm. Only choices. Below them, waves struck basalt in percussive cadence, echoes of a heartbeat slowed but steadfast. The world, soothed for now, inhaled. Clouds parted. Full moon rose, silvering Balerion's wings into vast mirrors reflecting Earth's new era. Whether peace or another storm awaited beyond that horizon, none could say. But for one long breath, kingdoms stood under the shelter of dragon wings and believed that might could be chained to mercy, and mercy forged into law as enduring as any sword. And by that belief, hope took seed in the ashes. The season of dragon spring settled over Westeros like a dream half-remembered. Gentle rains in the crownlands, lavender-scented breezes wandering the reach, and frost that clung only to the highest pinnacles of the Vale before yielding to dawn. Even the north, long used to bristling against winter's bite, tasted an almost southern warmth. Green buds furred the branches of Winterfell's ancient weirwood, and black-winged swallows nested in its red-leaved canopy for the first time in living memory. Bards roamed the roads unmolested, plucking vibrant chords that carried tales of Ice's defeat and dragon mercy. Every hearth repeated the refrain in some variation. "The long night is dead, all hail the dawn." Yet beneath that bloom of hope, deeper roots writhed roots of ambition, of faith twisted, of ancient hungers newly awakened by the tremors of cataclysmic change. Dragons had burned back the dark, but dragons also cast long shadows. Dragonstone's volcanic halls thrummed with burgeoning purpose. Blacksmiths hammered night and day in the molten glow, forging plowshares tipped with tempered dragonglass for northern farmers who insisted on planting deep, just in case the dead breathe again. Alchemists, humbled by Balerion's apotheosis, now sought gentler miracles. Glass tubes that could carry dragon-forged heat into city aqueducts. Candles laced with shimmer ash to dispel damp from sickbeds. Lenses ground from obsidian sand to magnify stars no maesters I had mapped. Princess Emberwing, the hatchling who had cracked her shell under Daenerys' lullaby, skittered across basalt floors trailing sparks from wing claws. She shadowed Eothero's acolytes, squeaking mimicries of their chants. When she attempted her first true flame, only steam emerged. She yelped, indignant, and nipped a startled apprentice on the heel. The priest laughed softly, declaring it a sign that even fledgling fire learned patience. Daenerys had transformed an entire storeroom into a nursery of heated stones and copper mirrors, each calibrated to bathe the eggs in gradual warmth. 2 remained unhatched. Every dawn she sang round, flat Valyrian syllables that filled the chamber with a hush akin to snowfall. Maester Marion, piebald-bearded and prone to skepticism, kept diaries of shell thickness, temperature, and the precise shade of ember glow. He predicted they would hatch before the moon's next quarter. Daenerys only smiled. She trusted neither charts nor auguries, but instead the quiet hum of life she felt pulsing within the shells. Across the narrow sea, the free cities stewed. Pentos petitioned for trade compacts, lists for royal marriages, bravos for indemnities over ruined fleet interests, and Volantis nursed vengeance like sour wine. In the Triarch Palazzo, the remains of their shadow-glass Leviathan, twisted ribs of crystalline black, were entombed in a sealed basilica. Rumor whispered that the Triarchs hired shadowbinders from Ashai and blood sorcerers from the Shadowlands. If dragonfire could break winter, they reasoned, something colder than winter might break dragons. But every attempt to replicate Moonstone's frostbinding failed. The art had died with the Night King, and so Volantis turned to older, more desperate arts. The Iron Islands faced their own schism. Lord Balon Vane Greyjoy sharpened his disquiet into plans. Raiders returned with stories of frost krakens haunting the deeps, of ghostly voices sounding through hull planks at midnight. A priest of the drowned god emerged from the surf one morning clad in robes crusted with ice, proclaiming that the sea had tasted dragon heat and would spit it back tenfold. Balon listened, scowling at the horizon where Balerion's Dawn Patrol silhouette sometimes shimmered, a vast black glyph upon the gold sky. He called the captains to Pike's Sea Tower and spoke of eschewing golden compacts with King's Landing. "We take what is ours," he said. Yet the old ways rang hollow to younger captains who had watched whites crumble under black-red fire. They feared that if they raided the mainland, dragon wrath would melt their islands to slag. Civil discord brewed, saltier than the tides. Balerion himself seldom left Dragonstone now. Yet when he flew, the sky shuddered. Fishermen along the Blackwater beaches marked his rare ascents. Nets sagged, and shoals dispersed leagues away. When he passed above the Red Keep's rooftops, windows rattled as if a silent storm had pressed its palm against the city's throat. But he flew quietly, no flame, no roar. His shadow a slow eclipse gliding across tilled fields. Word spread that he was searching for something, though none guessed what. Perhaps he only drank the realm's new peace into his monstrous lungs, measuring it. Cregan Stark's reform of the Night's Watch advanced briskly. Holdfasts in the gift were gifted anew. Grain tithes guaranteed, glass-pointed plows delivered, and volunteers from every corner arrived. Reach Second Sons seeking glory, Dorne's Hill warriors chasing legend, even Bravosi Sellswords who claimed they owed the realm a debt for safer sea lanes. Cregan, practical to the marrow, set them to work raising a new ring fort named Dawnshield 4 leagues south of Castle Black. Stones taken from Night King ruins were set into its walls, each inscribed with a rune promising vigilance. One morning, rangers discovered a peculiar spire of ice thrust from a melt pool half a league north of the wall. At its tip perched a single white raven, feathers rimed but unshivering. The bird's eyes gleamed azure. Then it blinked, eyes turning ordinary black, and flew away. The spire melted in minutes, leaving a puddle that steamed despite the chill air. Cregan frowned at the vanishing water and sent a message to Dragonstone. Signs of afterwinter persist. King's Landing thrived, yet tension laced its bustle. Guilds squabbled over who would operate the newly proposed dragon-heated aqueducts. The City Watch struggled to curb black market trading in Night King relics, shards of obsidian and false frost spears churned out by Riverland's forgeries. A troupe of Roynish fire dancers drew nightly crowds at the reconstructed dragon pit, their routines culminating in a flare of orange powder that spelled you are safe in Valyrian glyphs across the night sky. The small folk cheered, but the High Septon cautioned that such spectacles skirted blasphemy. "Safety is no anthem," he sermonized. "It is a prayer renewed daily by humility." Cynics at taverns retorted that humility did not warm soup. A moon's turning after the conclave, Aegon summoned a council of 9 to Dragonstone's Hall of Dragons. Daenerys, Cregan, Argilac, Lady Sabetha Lannister, Prime Armithyr Tyrell, Carl Corgyle arriving aboard a sleek ivory dhow, Corlys Waters, Eothero, and Maester Marion. Balerion remained outside, curled around the courtyard, the sky tinted rose by his sleeping embers. Aegon opened with 3 decrees. First, the royal vestry would fund coastal garrisons and lighthouse beacons empowered by dragonglass burners. Gifts to every lord who pledged ship levies against seaborne threat. This mollified Balon's neighbors, though the Ironborn themselves remained sullen. Second, the realm would hold the inaugural Dawn Fair, a month-long caravan exchanging northern furs for Dornish oranges, Carthian silks for Reach wines, Lysine glassware for Pine Realm timber. The fair would conclude with a grand moot at Harrenhal, where disputes might be weighed beneath neutral banners. Lady Sabetha smirked. Such markets favored Lannister gold, but outwardly nodded her assent. Third, the king and queen would tour every kingdom astride lesser dragons while Balerion stood sentinel at Dragonstone. "We must show that might bows to trust," Daenerys explained. Argilac appreciated the symbolism, though privately he doubted small folk could see trust from the ground when any dragon wing darkened the sun overhead. The council debated logistics. Tyrell demanded extra escorts for his grain caravans. Corgyle insisted on desert contingents to repel steppe raiders, rumored to harry Dornish border passes. Cregan reminded them all that the Night's Watch still needed recruits. Corlys offered to bankroll a new fleet of courier cogs dubbed the Ember Line, which would sail from the Arbor to White Harbor weekly bearing urgent writs. Eothero listened, silent, until talk turned to an unclaimed wilderland, the frozen crag where the black icicle once stood. Miners reported veins of cloudy quartz laced with luminous filaments, crystal sinew, they called it, that resisted melt. Some lords salivated at its potential for jewelry, others for spear tips. The priest stirred. "Touch not the crag," he warned, voice echoing under vaulted basalt. "What remains there is embers of shadow. A blade forged of that or might betray its wielder, for it remembers the king it served." Cregan favored caution. Sabetha eyed potential profit. Daenerys decided. The crag would become a sanctum, no mining, no settlement, guarded by Night's Watch wardens sworn to burn any scavenger camps. The motion passed, 6 votes to 3. Weeks later, Aegon and Daenerys embarked upon the Dawn Tour. They rode not Balerion but Vhagar and Caraxes, still formidable, yet mortal enough to reassure. Dawn heralds preceded them, boys in ridged leather blowing long horns whose notes spiraled into the clouds. They alit first at Gulltown, where gull flocks fled in frenzied spirals. The Arryns received them atop the Eyrie, trembling at wind gusts that rattled frost-rimmed lintels. Maester Marion distributed copper mirrors that harnessed Caraxes' exhalations to warm hallways. Mountain clans offered goat cheese in gratitude for melted snowmelt channels feeding their fields. Next they soared to Tumbleton, where Ormond Hightower presented a mechanical loom-spun of brass gears and dragonglass bearings. It wove banners that shimmered like starlight. Daenerys commissioned one for each holdfast to fly at the Dawn Fair. At Highgarden, Armithyr Tyrell staged a festival of roses. The dragons perched on hilltop terraces smelling of apple blossom. Wandering singers performed The Long Night Falls, a ballad whose final verse ended with Balerion circling the sun. Children flung garlands onto Caraxes' neck. He tolerated the flowers until one dripped petal bits, then shook like a hound, showering laughter across the green. In the Westerlands, Lady Sabetha guided them into the glitter-deep caverns, unveiling veins of pink quartz. She proposed carving halls where sunstones could store dragonlight for miners. Aegon agreed, but on condition that half the profit fund harbor reconstruction at Lannisport. Sabetha's lips tightened, yet she bowed. Through it all, Balerion remained upon Dragonstone, coiling and uncoiling like a continent in slumber. Sea captains reported distant magma flares. Dragon yawns, they joked. Fishermen praying at dawn swore they saw the Black Dread's eyelids flick open, reflecting dawn fire across leagues of water like twin lighthouses. Ships set course by those flickers, trusting the path between them as blessed. Then came the first omen of renewed darkness. A whaler out of Ibn, hull encrusted with barnacles, limped into White Harbor trailing black-iced wounds along its keel. The captain spoke of pursuing a pod of narwhals north of Skagos when a dark fluke surfaced, twice the size of a warship, rim, edged with frost crystals sharp as scythes. It struck the whaler's rudder, freezing planks on contact. Sailors hacked at the ice. It bled dark water that steamed. Before they could flee, the beast sounded, leaving a whirlpool of slush that carved skeletal runes in the wake. Runes matching Night King sigils. Cregan read the report under torchlight. He dispatched ravens south bearing one sentence: winter flotsam stirs. At the same time, far in Essos, a caravan crossing the Bones encountered a dust storm tinted cobalt. When it cleared, half the pack horses lay dead, hooves frozen solid though midday heat scalded. The survivors traced the storm to a monolith of black ice jutting from a dune. Carved around its base were swirling marks echoing those on the Ibn captain's rudder wound. Rumor spread along the Silkway. Some said the Night King's soul had fled east seeking new hosts. Others claimed the winter god worshipped by the Jogos Nigh Riders awakened. Whatever the cause, caravans began to circumvent the Bones entirely, funneling trade into Westeros's burgeoning markets. Yatharo read the twin omens, the Frostkraken rune and the Bone Monolith, then secluded himself in Dragonstone's throat for 7 days. When he emerged, eyes rimmed crimson, he sought Aegon and Daenerys. In the chart room where naval routes crisscrossed stained glass tables, he unrolled a vellum tapestry depicting stylized flame, ice, and a third sigil, a circle half shadow, half void. The mask cracked, he reminded them. Shadow dispersed, but fragments drift still, seeking anchor in places where heat and cold meet. Deep ocean trenches, desert hearts, glacial fissures, wounds between extremes. I fear the world's balance will birth new avatars. Daenerys stroked Emberwing, now dog-sized and learning to spit small jets of proper flame. If Shadow reforms, she asked, does Balerion seal endure? In flesh, yes, Eothero said, but not in will. Should Shadow twist men's hearts, dragons cannot quell every uprising. Flame within must be matched by flame without, 1,000 sparks in mortal spirits. That is your task. Aegon nodded grimly. Then we ignite hope in each holdfast before fear reignites winter. The Dawn Fair launched under cerulean skies. Hundreds of wagons converged on Harrenhal, its melted towers bedecked in fresh plaster carved with symbols of unity. Northmen traded direwolf pelts for arbor gold. Dornish potters swapped sun-baked amphory for smoked river trout. Carthene silk merchants displayed shimmering banners that caught dragonlight and glowed peach at dusk. Poets performed epic stanzas praising the bound Black Dread, careful to mention the fire bridal gem thrice for good omen. On the fair's final eve, Aegon addressed the throng from Harrenhal's broad courtyard. No stage sufficed. Instead, Vagr crouched, wings half spread, forming a living dais. Torches lit her bronze scales into molten copper. Caraxes perched upon a collapsed turret, crooning an undernote. Emberwing fluttered circles around the broken crown spire, streaking embers like meteors. Aegon raised Blackfire to catch starlight. This fair proves the realm's arteries run warm, he said. Trade, song, friendship. These are shields stronger than steel. Yet rumors crawl. Frost kraken, bone monolith, coins on faceless altars. Do not tremble. Remember that our might is bound, not to threaten, but to guide. Balerion sleeps, yet watchful. Dragons do not measure crops or coin, they measure courage. Show him you are brave, and no shadow nor wave will breach these shores. His voice carried across tents and wagons, into the hush of listening thousands. Flames in braziers flared as if applauding. When silence fell, a maiden from the summer isles plucked a soft chord on a 9-string harp. A Myrish conjurer cast shimmering dust that formed spiraling dragons over the crowd. Children squealed, chasing the sparks. Later, under low lanterns, Aegon and Daenerys walked the fair incognito, cloaks hooded. They tasted peppered eel set on barley cakes, sampled Dornish pear wine, and watched a puppet show reenact the Night King's fall. Balerion puppet so large it required 4 handlers. The audience roared. Daenerys whispered, "If only the world always laughed more than feared." Aegon squeezed her hand. "We must tend the hearth so laughter outshines the cold." The hearth, however, flickered when word arrived that 3 free cities had forged the pact of the Silent Deep. Lys, Tyrosh, and Volantis pledged fleets, coin, and arcana to counter draconic hegemony. Their envoys insisted it was defensive, but spies reported a consortium of alchemists transporting casks of unknown resin across disputed lands. Corlys' Emberline galleys shadowed the shipments until one night a storm swallowed the convoy. The galleys found debris. Barrels ruptured, resin seeping across waves, freezing in unnatural rosettes. Maester Marion tested fragments. They steamed cold, an impossibility. He surmised it was alchemic moonstone reagent combined with shadow oil. Daenerys asked if it could wound dragons. Marion, pale, replied he dared not guess. Aegon convened war council. Cregan urged blockades. Argilac offered Stormfleet. Sabetha proposed cutting Triarch trade lines. Corgyle suggested infiltration. Eothero warned that aggression might feed Shadow's thirst. Debate raged until Daenerys' voice cut through. "We fight not Triarchs but fear. We offer them open sky under Balerion's vow. Dragonfire meets only those who wield shadow." She drafted letters inviting the Triarch Archons to parley at Sunspear. She promised demonstration of the fire bridle's restraint and offered joint research into safer alchemy. Argilac scoffed. Sabetha rolled eyes. But Aegon sealed letters with wax impressed by the gem. The wax did not sear, only warmed, proof of temperance. Whether Triarch pride would bend to invitation remained to be seen. Meanwhile, on the Isle of Faces, Greenseers awoke to dreams of black waves crowned by crimson flame. They carved warnings into weirwood bark. Beware the sea of icefire. Ravens carried leaves bearing that phrase to Maester Rookeries. Scholars puzzled. Sailors shivered. Ibn whalers reported waters so cold they hissed steam, yet glowed red beneath, as though magma flowed under frozen skin. The sea of icefire, some whispered, was where winter's ghost courted Earth's blood. Cregan petitioned to send a watch galleas north with dragonglass harpoons. Aegon agreed, appointing Corlys as admiral. The Starseeker, fastest vessel in the Ember Line, set sail with a crew of Frostguard Marines, Eothero's apprentice Giselle, and a pair of Wyvern Heralds tethered in the hold. As the Starseeker vanished beyond Last Hearth's horizon, a hush draped the realm, a held breath before unknown tide. Days blurred to nights across Westeros. The harvest proved rich, storehouses brimmed, and merchants gilded their ledgers. Yet under that veneer, watchers glimpsed tremble. A farmer in the Riverlands plowed up a chunk of obsidian shaped like a screaming face, mouth a hole that whispered cold air. When he broke it, smoke poured and froze wheat stalks. In the Dothraki Sea, a Khal and his Khalasar found a glass statue of a stallion, life-size, fractured with blue veins. They shattered it for trophies. Those who kept fragments later screamed of frost burning their sleep. A merchant in Quarth displayed silk that shimmered night blue shadows. Buyers woke with visions of faceless watchers. The merchant vanished. The stall remained open, unsold silk sighing like sighs in the wind. On Dragonstone, the 2 remaining eggs finally hatched. One, scales the color of ash and gold, chirped constant, hungry. Daenerys named him Gildersoot. The other, smoky purple with white belly, stared solemnly before taking first breath. A silent hatchling she called Shadeflame. Eothero blessed each with a drop of Emberwing's flame. Their birth canted the balance of draconic bloodlines. The realm now hosted 5 living dragons. Maester Marion predicted exponential population within a generation. Aegon mused, "May the world be ready for such wings." He and Daenerys resolved to raise the hatchlings among small-folk villages to accustom both dragon and people to coexistence. They built airy cottages on pilings overlooking crownland fields, staffed by keepers sworn to nonviolence. Children hand-fed the wormlings goat milk and honey mash. Gildersoot flamed prematurely, singeing a baker's beard. The village laughed, dousing beard and dragonling alike in rain-barrel water. Shadeflame glided above wheat rows, spooking crows and sparing harvest. Stories of gentle drakes spread faster than fear. Months after setting sail, the Starseeker returned, hull rimed with opalescent glaze that hissed under sun. Corlys's beard bore frost crystals. Giselle's eyes flicked from gold to murky gray, sign of prolonged shadow exposure. They carried 3 artifacts. A sphere of ice that glowed ember inside. A barnacle-encrusted chain linked the size of a man's torso, rimed with frost that never melted. And a logbook of water temperatures that swung wildly, boiling at surface, freezing at depth. Corlys's report stunned the council. Beyond the sunset sea's curve floats a whirlpool of glassy water ringed by flame fissures beneath the waves. At its heart sleeps an ice leviathan coiled around molten vent. Shadow gathers there, feeding on the collision of extremes. The marines barely escaped as tentacles surfaced, dripping glowing frost. Aegon stared at the link. Its frost did not melt in his hot hand. He turned to Eothero. "Shadow swam west," the priest murmured. "It found cradle in world's wound. Magma holds fire, abyss births cold. There, mask fragments may grow a new face." Daenerys whispered, "Is Balerion enough?" "For such depths," Eothero answered, "we need more than flame or frost. We need the pivot point, mercy and memory. We need mankind's will." A silence fell. Cregan broke it. "We must marshal a fleet, a flame fleet. Steel-keeled, glass-reamed, with dragons watchers overhead." Argilac offered Stormlander hulls. Tyrell promised Reach Oak. Sabetha pledged gold. Corgyle volunteered the speediest sand skiffs to scout shoals. Aegon stood. "Then we forged the Dawn Armada." The Dawn Armada's keels kissed water within a season. Their hulls banded with dragonglass interwoven with winterfire ironwood. Sails dyed crimson and pearl. Each prow bore a rune of fire stabilized by iced quartz. Maester Marion dubbed them Sister Stars. Each half flame, half frost. Before launching, Aegon led a rite upon Dragonstone's beach at low tide. He traced 9 concentric circles in sand, filled inner ring with seawater, outer with coals, the space between with salt-soaked reeds. Eothero blessed the rings with smoke from the fire-bridal gem. Daenerys offered Emberwing's first shed scale. Cregan planted a direwolf fong. Corgyle a cactus spine. Sabetha a gold ingot. Tyrell a rose petal. Argilac a drop of stormwater. Corlys flung a coin minted from Night King quartz into the sea. Balerion watched from a promontory, glowing green eyes reflecting the fire-lit tide. When final vows closed, he dipped his head. The ocean surged but did not flood the rite. It accepted, and so the realm, once again, marched toward uncertainty. Yet this time, grief was tempered by hope, fear by resolve, and power by covenant. Bards penned new verses. The march of the Dawn Armada, 5 dragons in the field, the binding of flame and frost. Small folk hummed them while harvesting late barley. Mothers told children, "As long as you keep kindness burning, shadows shrink away." Children asked, "Will the dragons always guard us?" Mothers answered, "So long as we remember fear and choose courage." High above these conversations, Balerion stirred, not restless but alert. He inhaled the world's shifting balances, fire of hearths, chill of distant deeps, sigh of wind over fair tents. The boundless might within him no longer strained at its leash. It paced the limits Daenerys and Aegon had set, like a great lion patrolling beloved territory. He would not grow larger, yet he sensed threats beyond size. Cunning, desperation, faith turned sour. For those he kept his fires banked and ready. On a clear dawn, he rose on silent wings over Dragonstone, carving an arc above the sea lanes where the first sister stars of the Dawn Armada unfurled sails. Sunlight caught his scales, igniting cascading flashes of red and black across the waves. Warning, promise, unspoken anthem. Deckhands below shaded eyes, awed by the immensity that watched their fragile prows from the heavens. But Balerion did not loom as oppressor. He glided a full mile above, a shadow bringing relief from glare, a guardian whose presence wrote across sky. You are small, but not alone. Courage lifts you. Hold your light steady, and the dawn will always find you. At his side, Vhagar and Caraxes joined, their roars braided in the wind. Behind them fluttered three small shapes, Emberwing darting ahead, Gildersoot swaying lazy loops, Shadeflame gliding the periphery in silent curiosity. 5 dragons, 5 stars ascending, 5 lights across the firmament heralding a realm reborn. Below, Aegon and Daenerys watched from the prow of the flagship Morning Flame. Wind lifted their cloaks. She leaned into him. "We are ready?" she asked. "We are alive," he answered. The Armada's drums pounded, the beat of 1,000 hearts steering toward the unknown. Oars dipped, sails billowed, prows cleft waves that hissed like welcoming serpents. The horizon stretched immense and uncharted, painted in rose shadows and gold. And across that boundless line, the war of winter's corpse and summer's promise would play anew. Not as end and doom, but as proof that living fires, once mastered, could illuminate the darkest sea without consuming it. Thus began the age of the tempered flame, when dragons and mortals alike would learn to steer their power not as conquerors but stewards, and the greatest battle would not be against shadow or frost or leviathan, but against the lure of dominion unchecked. Yet for now, sails cracked in fresh wind, wings cut azure skies, and the dawn, bright, fragile, undefeated, rose again, reflected in Balerion's steady, ember-lit eyes.